Hello, this is Joe Bongiorno, timeline keeper and creator of Supernatural Encounters.
This is John Jackson Miller, writer of Star Wars comics and novels, and you're listening to Star Wars with Stevie B.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another Star Wars Talk. Today I have a very special guest for you, Mr. Rich Handley. He's wrote articles for Star Wars Insider, has done some short story work. He's worked with other authors, including Charlene Nooncomb, Abel G. Pena, and Joe Bongiorno. And he's wrote and contributed to a lot of other fandoms as well, including Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Planet of the Apes, and more. He's highly talented and very creative, and it was such a pleasure and honor to chat with him. And he's such a genuine guy, and it was so much fun. Again, I want to thank you all for your support. I appreciate it very much. And without further ado, Mr. Rich Handley. So get her going. There we
You
are.
interviewed Joe recently, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, Mr. Bongiorno, it's awesome. And he had a lot of good things to say about you. And you guys recently got back in touch. So that was good. He said you passed along your new book there, Born on the Bayou.
Oh, he mentioned that we had lost touch for a while.
Yeah. Well, things. I mean, that happens in life, right? We all go through different.
During the pandemic. I think things got strained because it was the pandemic. That's really what it was. But I've known him for 30 years.
Yeah. You guys worked together and collaborated on a lot of different things through the time. Yeah, from what I noticed. Yeah,
a couple of things. Yeah, it wasn't a lot. Mostly he's a friend in the real world. But we worked on a few things together. Yeah.
Yeah, that always helps too when you're buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was digging into you, sir, the tale of the tape. Boy, you've been in the game for a long time, making good contributions and creative ideas for all sorts of different fandoms.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's it's one of those things where it takes a lot of work to be able to do it, but it's never something you resent, because the amount of work involved always has a payoff when you see your name in print on a franchise that you love, and that people seem to react well to it, and you realize you've contributed something. It's fun.
Yeah,
It never gets old. Don't let any writer tell you that. It never gets old.
No, I can imagine. Not. It always intrigues me hearing how authors and writers, journalists, what have you, get inspired to go down that path of doing that. Because really, I was thinking about it the other day. I mean, you guys get a lot of credit. You were nominated some of your material for the Eisner Award, which is awesome, which is a big accomplishment.
Thank you.
There's something about when you're young, right, and you see something on, whether it's television or you read it or what have you, that there's that magic feeling to it, right?
Yes.
Like the perfect example would be, whatever your beliefs are, whoever's listening and watching, but like Santa Claus, perfect example. When you're a kid, it's something, it's like the special, this mystical, magical thing. And then as you get older, obviously, things come out and be told. And then that magic kind of goes away.
So you're telling me Santa's not real?
No, unfortunately not. I'm sorry to be the spoiler for you on that. But you yourself, amongst others, you still create that magic for us.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say.
And that's an awesome thing, because when we read that, whatever it may be, it brings us back to, it brings me back to it. That feeling that you get inside. And I know everyone knows what I'm talking about. It's just something special about it. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you for saying that. That was very kind.
Yeah. And it means a lot that you took time out of your day to spend time with me and chat. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Hopefully I'm not holding you up, or I don't know if you get into football. I know it's Sunday. That's the football season.
My wife is the only non-sports widow on Long Island. I've never watched a football game in my life. So.
No? Yeah, I've been in and out of it. It's hard to keep up, and I've been on we'll say the nerdy side of things, and I mean that in a positive way through my life so far.
I just will point behind me and say, yes, I get it. That's comic books. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say too on Instagram for everyone that you have an Instagram page, and you posted some pictures of some of your collection, and when I seen that, I was just blown away. I'm like, impressive, and it looks like you keep it in good condition. as we all should.
Yeah, that's just one of several shelves. There's a few more. Yeah, that way.
That
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I don't know how my wife hasn't left me.
Yeah. Hey,
But like you
I
said, I keep it organized, and so she thinks it's fun, even though she's not into it. So
yeah, my wife is the same way. She comes down here and she looks and she's like, "What are you? Do you play with these?" Or and I'm like, "Well, honestly, I'd like to, but I'd be afraid you'd come down and hear me making weird noises and trying to act out scenes with my little figures, you know."
yeah, I am. I'm down in my basement office, and it's people will use the phrase like man cave, and I don't ever use phrases like that just because I think it's kind of misogynistic alpha male-ish. But
Yeah.
I will say that this is definitely a nerd cave, if nothing else. And there are several things down here my wife bought. So I mean, even though she is not part of geek fandom, she'll go out somewhere and see something and go, he'll appreciate this, and bring it home. And about 98% of the time, she's dead on. Sometimes she'll every now and then I'll go, zombie pencil eraser? I don't know. But you know what? It's on the shelf. Just
It's
because,
there.
yeah, exactly.
There's a spot for it.
Right.
Yep. Same thing here. She doesn't do it as much as she used to because it just keeps growing and growing, but that's all part of the love that we have for it and the appreciation,
Same. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And yeah, my kids bring their friends down here and they just kind of look around in awe. And it's cool to get that feeling from them too, you
So
know.
that you'll appreciate this then, given your love of Star Wars. Years ago, I guess we're going back to around the time of the prequels. Um, I had been talking to Jason Fry, and he mentioned that he was looking to offload his collection of the original Kenner figures. Now, you may have noticed from the shelf behind me and from pictures you're seeing on Instagram that when I collect something, I go full force. There's no middle ground. Like, you'll never see me collecting Batman comics because I'd have to sell this house in order to afford
Oh,
20,000
yeah.
Batman comics, because I'd have to have them all, and that way lies madness. So I'll read them online. I will never collect them because I would lose everything I have. And so Jason said he was getting rid of the figures, and I was like, oh well, I'll take them. I did, and that put me on the road. Now I said, oh well, I have whatever the number was. What was it, 94? I think, whatever it was. Like, well, I have these. Obviously, I need everything produced after these too, because it would be uncivilized not to have everything made after the classic Kenner figures. And so I just sort of did a sigh and explained to my wife, yeah, I'm adding another collection. And she's just like, but so what ended up happening was by the time I got caught up from the point at which that left off, Jason's original story characters left off, until the Attack of the Clones figures, it was well over 1,000, because I had every variant, I had all of the pack-ins, I had like unproduced prototypes. I went bonkers, and I built custom shelves for them. And the reason I bring all this up is that my kids' friends used to want to come in. They were young, and they wanted to come in and look at them. And my wife's grandmother, who never understood geek culture at all and had trouble on steps, was like, lead me downstairs. I've heard all about this. I want to see it. And so she's down there going, what's the giant dinosaur down there? Well, it's not really a dinosaur. It's a creature on Naboo. And I'm like feeling self-conscious, and but it was fun. And then one day, about 3 years later, I'm looking around at this insane plastic monstrosity I've built myself, with thousands of eyes staring at me while I'm trying to write, that I haven't really been able to dust, because dusting a shelf with 1,000
Oh,
figures is just insane. And I go, yeah, I'm done. And then I just sold the whole thing on Rebel Scum for enough money to put a new bathroom in my house.
yeah. Well, I'm sure.
And I'll tell you, I get more use out of the bathroom than I ever got out of the figures.
Is that where you come up with your creative ideas?
It would not be unheard of. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that people just they just go into the bathroom, shut the door. Not that they're using the bathroom, but
Right.
just sitting there because that's like a quiet space for everyone, right?
Well, that I have to admit that no, I've never actually done that, but this is my quiet space.
Yeah.
You can't see most of the room, but it's basically a basement TV room that is my office. It's me,
Yeah.
and so no, I don't need the bathroom. But I do come up with ideas while I'm showering.
Yeah. I have a
And then
friend that
I scramble to, because I'm like, I'm 55. My brain isn't as spongy as it once was. I'm likely to forget things. So I'm like, well, this is going to be a short shower because otherwise I will not remember what I just came up with. Yeah.
yeah, that I have a buddy that he says that's the best stress reliever too, is
Mhm.
just go in the shower and just
That's what it is. Yep. Close your eyes, take a shower, let the water hit the back of your neck, and it takes the tension out of your neck and your back, and then suddenly you become more imaginative. Your mind is not caught up in the stress, and you start thinking, and you go, well, crap, because I've got shampoo in my eyes, and I need to get out of here and write this down.
yep. Yep. That's crazy that you had that amount of figures. I envy that because some of
No,
them
no,
figures are hard to
it was
find.
crazy. It was a compulsion. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing. There's healthy collecting, and then there's insanity. Uh,
Y-
and possible need of therapy. And that I think that's what I had reached. And when I looked around, and I just went, honestly, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and I kind of hate it. And
Yeah.
so, but it was just because, look, my cat would come into the room and
Mm,
pounce, and
knock
then
them
I would
over.
spend 3 hours trying to find all of the guns and put them in the right hands. And
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a
abducting was
pain.
a nightmare.
That could be a pain.
So
Yeah,
you
I
have some hanging on your wall, and the cool thing is that you never have to dust the figures because they're in the package.
yep.
Mine were all on custom-made stands. I had 1,000 custom-made stands with stickers I made in Photoshop saying what set they were from. I mean, it
Oh,
was
you went into it detailed.
I don't even know what happened. I can't even imagine why I did this, but don't get me wrong, it was an incredible amount of fun to do it. Um, and I did it wisely. Like I would go on eBay and I would buy collections that overlapped. So let's say one had 100 figures and another had 300 figures, and there were 50 figures between them
That you didn't
that I
have.
needed. I
Yeah.
then sold the rest. So by the time I was done, I had spent almost nothing for the entire set.
Oh
And then I sold the
goodness.
set for enough money to put a new bathroom in the house. So in the end, Jason giving me those figures, it turned out to be a very good thing, and it was fun while it lasted. But look, there was a third prequel coming out, and who knew what else at that point. And
Yeah.
it was like a figure a week, and there were like 98 Han Solos, all with the same pose. It was getting ridiculous, and I was like, because my wife would walk in and go, "Why do you have so many Luke Skywalkers wearing that beige outfit?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. Why do they keep producing them? I don't know."
There's well, that's kind of see, when I grew up when I was younger, it was the Kenner Power of the Force one. So that's
Right,
kind
right.
of where it all started for me with collecting. There was a gentleman that in my town that he goes around and he put an ad in the paper and he was on the radio and he goes and collects all these old things from the past from all sorts of different cultures, and then he'll resell them or keeps them, and he had shown me pictures of he went to this lady's house. She passed away and her kids were getting rid of her collection. Well, on the wall was all the actual original Kenner figures with like some with the coins, how them go for hundreds of dollars now, all in great condition.
Hmm.
And he was going to purchase them. Well, one of the kids went in there and started taking them off the wall. Well, they were stapled to the wall. So a lot of the cardboard was all
Oh,
wrecked, and
man.
it was just like, oh my word, to have that would have been incredible because it's kind of hard to find some of that stuff now, really in good condition,
Yeah, yeah.
you know. Even with books and comics, like you mentioned about Batman, like an arm and a leg for some of that stuff to try to find.
I mean, look, back in the day, if you go back 100 years ago, in the early days of the comics, they were produced on basically newspaper stock, and kids read them and they drew on them, and then their parents threw them out and they got new ones because they cost a couple of pennies.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of them just don't exist. I mean, they all exist in some form, but because of reprints and so forth. But it's not like they've lost whole sections of Batman. It's just that to actually for a completist who wants the actual issues, it would be completely impossible to
Yeah.
find every single Batman appearance unless you spent an unheard of amount of money,
Yeah.
because so few copies exist of some of these issues. You'd have
Yeah.
to buy reprints.
Oh, yeah, collecting.
So
I know.
with what you just said about him finding the figures with the coins, my primary collecting is Star Trek comics. That's the core of my collecting. I have every comic going back to the very first one, and a lot of rarities that some fans might not know about. And that's not one I'm ever just going to go, I'm done with this, because it's been my passion since I was a teenager, and it's kind of like, I've done a lot of writing about it. Well, so back in the day, going back a long time ago, I had this. I was missing one issue, and that was the very first one from Gold Key from 1967. It was hard because this was in the pre-internet days, and they were commonly going for $800 or $900 a piece. And I'm a collector, but I'm not stupid. I'm not spending $900 on what is a very badly written and badly drawn comic, right? But I wanted to have it someday, and I thought, I'm shrewd. I will wait. And so years went by, and I had the other 60 issues and not that one. And I went to this yard sale, and my wife and I used to go yard selling a lot. And every now and then she'd see comic boxes, stuck in between the Christmas ornaments and the paper mache things the kids made that there's no reason to be selling, but they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there'd be like one short box with like 14 comics in it, and she'd like check it out, and I'd be like, there's not going to be anything in there, but I would always look anyway. And we get to this one, and it's like the same exact situation. It's probably a feather duster and 6 coffee mugs with stupid slogans and a comic box. And I start looking through, and I'm like, yeah, crap. Star Trek Gold Key #1, and she has it listed at 25 cents. And I honestly think my heart just stopped. Like, I may have suffered permanent brain damage, because I think my heart just stopped in that moment as I'm looking at this going, no, I'm awake. Like, there's no way this is actually happening right now. I couldn't do it. I couldn't give her a quarter for this. I ended up handing her money. I said, look, I can't do this. I can't.
Yeah.
You simply don't know what you have here. And I'm here, take some money. Cause I was like, I'm not going to screw over an old lady. I'm not going to do that. Especially when she was telling me the reason that she had this box was her son died. It was her son's comics. And I'm like, I can't do it. But yeah, that was the day I completed the collection. At a yard sale. Like, it was just wild. I couldn't believe that. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
but
it was a really
stuff
weird
happens.
collection too. It was like a bunch of crap and Gold Key Star Trek #1. It was a very strange collection.
But that stuff, I mean, garage sale season is like a big thing,
Yeah,
now you can find some gems. You could really find some gems, and that was very wonderful and kind of you to let her know. And that's good. That's good. People
take advantage of her. Give her a quarter for something that was going for $900.
Yeah.
The irony of that is, after the internet became more widespread, it became very clear Gold Key comic Star Treks, they weren't rare. You can find them on eBay now for a few dollars. It's just that back then people thought they were rare because there was this rumor going around that there'd been a warehouse fire that had destroyed everything. Then the internet happened and people realized, no, there's tons of them out there. So I'm really glad I didn't spend $900 for it, or I'd be crying right now.
But somebody probably did.
Oh, I'm sure lots did.
And yeah, I mean, the internet is a great thing and a resourceful tool now, but you didn't really know what you had. I had it out earlier. I went to a collectorabilia event. I like to go to them and, trade figures. I like to trade, or, you know what I'm saying. And somebody had a stack of comics, Star Wars comics, and there was some old Star Wars Insiders in there, which some of them are hard to find nowadays. Like, all that stuff is hard to find. But there was a Star Wars collector magazine, issue #1, and it was like a price guide for. It was really neat, and it was interesting. I was paging through it about, like you were saying, the different Lukes. There was a whole list of Lukes with the beige suit, missing a shoe. I mean, the lightsabers got. It was funny, But the prices were like $85, $50 for this. It was just cool to see that, from how things change over time.
Yeah, well, when I decided to sell them, I said to my wife, and I were talking about the fact that, our house needed some renovations. And I said, look, here's what I'm thinking. In the end, over the course of the last several years that I built this, if you add up everything I spent and then everything I sold, I'm probably only out about $200 or $300 for 1,000 figures. But this is worth several thousand. So
right.
I was thinking of selling this. And so I said, here's my suggestion to you. You let me build a DVD collection, and the rest goes to the bathroom. And she said, done. Because
All
like
on board.
yeah, so I kind of put together a nice DVD collection, and then took I don't know, like $6,000-7,000, and we put a new bathroom in the house. And it was like, but the joke I made about the bathroom before, I've also gotten a lot more use out of the DVDs than I ever would have gotten out of looking at little beady-eyed figures staring at me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that would probably kind of throw you for a loop sometimes. You're sitting down there late at night, and you look, all of a sudden you got all these toys looking at you, like, oh boy, something's gonna
It's
jump
funny
off.
'cause I'm not easily spooked, but I tend to work in the dark. Like, it's very light in here right now because of this, but
Yeah.
normally I tend to work in the dark. And so, because my computer is backlit, and I'd be sitting there at 2 a.m, and I'd stretch and I'd look. There's 1,000 figures just looking at me like this.
Something's
And
gonna happen.
it would really kind of creep me out sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned getting spooked. I mean, Halloween's just around the corner. You do any, traditions or anything? Watch some horror flicks?
So, years ago, I used to watch. I used to watch horror movies every Halloween. But I was always been a horror fan. Last couple of years, I've just gotten boring. I haven't been doing it. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we buy candy, no one comes by, and then we end up either eating it or giving it away.
I was gonna say that. It seems because we decorate the front of our house. We got some Star Wars blow-ups, Boba Fett, Grogu, stuff along that lines, and we dress up, and it's like kids. It's not like it was years ago, especially when I was younger, going trick-or-treating. I mean, it was a
Yeah,
big deal. But now you got so many different trends happening, like trunk or
absolutely.
treats, or this business is doing downtown trick-or-treating, all kinds of they made it into almost like a whole month ordeal now. But yeah,
But
I
it
was
means
watching.
house to house, it's not the same then.
Yeah,
I can
but
remember when I was a teenager, and we'd get groups of us, like 8, 10 of us, and we would hit every neighborhood in the area. We would be out there for hours, and it
yeah,
would just be fun. And we
yeah,
weren't out there egging anybody or doing
no,
anything bad. We were just having fun, going house to house in a safe group, and just being exhausted, and then coming back and going, I hate almond joys. What do you hate? Here, let's switch.
yeah,
And
yep,
now it's like we get 8 kids. They're all like 5 years old, and then we get a bunch of 20-year-olds who put on basically a sweatshirt that says ACDC. Aren't you a little low? I'm going as an ACDC fan. Yeah,
yeah,
move along. Yeah,
yep. Carry on, pal.
yeah, right, exactly.
So you mentioned earlier Star Trek is obviously your big passion, and when you were a teenager, is that what kind of got you inspired to pursue writing? And
So interesting story there, and I wouldn't say that Star Trek got me into writing, but it's definitely part of the bigger story. My mother, when I was a kid, was my whole life. My mother was a science fiction aficionado. She never did that, but she watched everything. So I grew up in a house, and I was born in the '60s. So I grew up in a house where my mom was watching Star Trek in its first run. She was a major Planet of the Apes fan. Her favorite show was Twilight Zone. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Outer Limits. All of this stuff was on all the time,
yeah,
and so I grew up watching it. And what I found out years later was that my mom liked to write, but she never showed it to anybody. So apparently that was there. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I guess that was an innate thing I inherited. But yeah, so yeah, she never showed anyone, and it's sad because she was good. Um, and, but so she instilled in me a love of science fiction, and I absorbed her values, her interests. And as I became, and I was a teenager, I took two classes in high school that were really kind of pivotal. One was creative writing, and the other was drama. And they were my favorite classes in high school. Loved them. And I said to myself, I really want to do this someday. And my parents, well-meaning, but it was their generation, said, oh, that's not realistic. That's like saying you want to be a movie star, you want to be in the NFL. Everyone says they want to be famous. And I was like, I never said I want to be famous. I don't actually want to be famous at all. I want to write. It's like, fame? No, I don't have any interest in fame. I want to write. And like, yeah, but you can't make money at it. be a teacher. Okay. So I became a teacher. And I didn't like it. I have so much respect for teachers because I hated it. I hated the experience. It was people do not understand how much work, how much stress, how much strife is involved in teaching. They're underpaid and underappreciated and shit upon. I'm sorry about the language here, but
No.
they are. And I but deep down, what I really wanted was to be in publishing. And it's actually Star Wars that got me in the door, not Star Trek, ironically, because it was always Star Trek I wanted to write about. But in the early days of the internet, and I suspect that you're probably a bit younger than I am, so you may not remember the Usenet much. Do you remember it?
No. I'm going to be 40, just so you know.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So that actually tracks. That would be that makes sense as a cutoff for not using the Usenet. So the Usenet was in the early days of the internet. There would, instead of going to Facebook and being part of a Star Wars Facebook group, you would log in using your rotary your rotary modem, and you'd hear
The dial-up days.
right, and then there was a group called Rec Arts. Was it Rec Arts SF Star Wars Miscellaneous? Like there were these long, what basically amount to URLs, but most people weren't using that term yet, and it was just these long addresses you had to type in, and you'd end up on text-based bulletin boards and interact with each other. Okay. So back then, that's how I met Charlene Newcomb and Jason Fry and Dan Wallace and Pablo Hidalgo and Mike Beidler, and everybody was just people who they were Star Wars fans, all going to the same place and discussing their favorite topics, and everybody, anybody over 40 who is writes for the franchise was probably there. And I became friends with Char Newcomb, who at the time was one of the writers for West End Games Star Wars Adventure Journal.
The journals, yeah.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed her Alex Winger stories, and we struck up a friendship, and I said, you should here. I said, this may be unsolicited and maybe arrogant of me, but I have a suggestion for where you could go with Alex. I was not pitching her anything. I was just saying, here's something. I really enjoy your stories. Here, I would, in my mind, picture her doing this next. And she said, "Oh, I like that. Why don't you write it with me?" And that was my entrance point. It was Char saying, "Why don't you write that with me?" And after fainting and then picking myself up and then fainting again, I went, "Yes, please."
Yeah.
And so next thing I knew, I was like right out of the gate. My first published work was for the EU, and it just sort of went from there. Like because I had that. Oh, actually, funny story. So Lucasfilm at the time had a very basic policy for what was allowed for people to write. You had to have bylines, which is understandable. You want someone who has a history, but man, is that frustrating. In order to get bylines, you have to have bylines. Like there's a certain logic loop there that falls apart, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to write for you. Have you written for someone else? No, that's why I'd like to write for you. Well, write for someone else first. Well, if I write for you, I can write for them too. Like it feeds off. You have to write for them first. And they say, have you written for someone else? But so I ended up writing for local newspaper. That's why I say I consider Star Wars the first byline, because my first actual work was like school board meetings, just writing about them for the newspaper. I was glad to have the bylines, but man, was that dull. But because I had that, I could then say to Lucasfilm, look, I have bylines.
Okay, you did it now. We'll take you.
Yeah, I covered school boards. Nobody cared about what I wrote about. Can I please write Star Wars now?
That's crazy.
And then because of that, like it just sort of goes from there. Like I started writing for the Insider. I started writing for Star Wars Fact Files and for the Galaxy Collector, which was Topps magazine. So I became a columnist at both the Galaxy Collector and the Insider. And then it just sort of went from there. And then the Star Trek thing actually came out of that, because the Insider at the time was the guy in charge was Dan Madsen, and Dan also was in charge of the Star Trek Communicator. And the editor of that was Larry Nemechek, and my editor at the at the Insider was Scott Chernoff, but it was Dan's company, and because they were owned by the same company, I said, "Hey, I don't know if this is allowed, but can I pitch to the Communicator?" And they said, "Well, yeah, you're part of the family." And so that just sort of suddenly I started getting Star Trek work. So it all went off of the Usenet. It all happened because I met Shar on the Usenet.
And you kind of gave her some ideas or opinions, and
Well,
that's
we used to talk on the phone, and I just said, like, she said, yeah, I don't know where I'm thinking, like, what I want to do with her next. And I said, well, given how the last story was, and I'll be honest, it's been so many years, I don't even know what it was I said to her because it's been a long time.
yeah.
But I said, here's what I would, if it were me, I would do this next. And she's like, oh, well, that's really good. You write, right? And I'm like, well, I want to. Well, why don't you write it with me? And I'm like, so the thing is, I'm big on paying it forward because Shar helped me. The reason I got in at the Insider was because, who was it? Wait a minute. Dan Wallace, I think. Yeah. Dan Wallace had put the good word in for me at the Insider. So because people had helped me, without them, it wouldn't happen. And so when I find out, if I ever have an opportunity to be able to get somebody work, I will always do it. Always, because I believe in paying forward.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Well, you seem like a genuine guy already. I get a good vibe from you, sir, already. And you're a big fan, and I love hearing these stories. So ramble on, and no need to try to censor yourself. This is an adult show, so don't feel bad. But you're right. Teachers are way underpaid to jump back to that, and they go through some shit. So
they do, and my leaving, it wasn't because I was like disgusted by teaching. It just wasn't my path, and I saw firsthand how much stress it is. And people they have summers off. Yeah, okay. Well, try living on a starting teacher salary. They don't have summers off. They're doing other stuff because they have to be able to pay their bills.
Yeah.
But they have 6 hours a day at work. Well, no, because now they go home and spend hours planning the next day. And if they're an English teacher, grading 150 papers, no, they do not have 6-hour days and summers off, and everybody blames them if the kid is not doing well.
Right.
It's never the parent, God forbid. No, it's the teacher's fault.
Yeah. There's actually my high school automotive teacher. I work at a race shop, and he comes and works in the summer, and he went through the ropes and went up, and now he's actually a professor at a college. So he comes back and he works on the race car during the summer, but he's even working in the summer. Like, he goes back, he's got the keys to the building. I mean, so I hear some of it. It's just, it's overwhelming. Yeah.
My wife recently retired. She was an educator for 30 years. And every week she'd come home and go, there are no words to what happened today. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, my hat's off to her for sticking with it for that long. Because
my hat is off to her.
Yeah. So that's great. So Charlene got you. Actually, Mr. Beidler, I believe, mentioned that. I had Mr. Beidler on the show too.
Well, Mike introduced me to Shar. So in a very real way, my entire writing career is thanks to Mike, because Mike and I are still good friends, and he introduced me to Shar, who he was friends with first through the Usenet.
Yeah, I believe he talked about that. Now that I think, that was a few months back that he was on. I had Marcel, a friend of ours that helped me, and
Mike's
came on. Awesome. Actually, he met Marcel. They got together and met. So that was. I told him, I said, if you ever make your way here to Wisconsin, I'll get you a burger and we'll have a beer together. So, so Star Trek, you eventually got to write for them. Now I know there's fans that like Star Wars. There's fans that like just Star Trek, and then there's groups that are like both sides of it, right? Now I always hear that for people to get into the expanded universe, it's overwhelming because they don't know where to start. There's so much, right?
For Star Trek or Star Wars?
For Star Wars.
Really,
but yeah. And I was going to say, I get a sense of how that feels because I have nothing against Star Trek. I'm very base level with my knowledge there. I nothing against it, but I feel like I don't know where to begin if I were to get involved with it. Because I mean, looking on your shelf back there, it's like, well, that's just some comics there.
It's a lot. It's yeah, and that, by the way, what you see behind me, that's just Star Trek.
Yeah,
So it's a lot. So the episodes, there are more than 900 over the course of 13 shows. There are more than 1,000 comics. And I don't remember what the current count on the novels is, but it's probably not far behind the comics. And then there's hundreds and hundreds of short stories, tons of video games. It's like with Star Wars. If you step in now and go, I'm going to do everything Star Trek, even just doing the shows. And my friend Eddie is currently doing this. He's watching Star Trek for the first time, and I'm getting such a kick because every episode he sends me a screenshot, and I'm like, I open up Facebook Messenger, and it's like the best of both worlds. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're gonna do this now. Like, and then we discuss, and it's wild to see somebody's reaction for the first time viewer. But I would imagine if it were him and going, and he's like me. He's somebody who, if he gets involved in a topic, he will engulf it like completely, like everything. But trying to step into Star Trek is like trying to step into the Star Wars EU.
Yeah.
And even if you just limit yourself to the EU and don't do the Disney era, it's still a staggering amount of stories. So imagine I'm going to read every Star Trek comic. How many are there? That. Yeah. And that's the top half of the shelf because you can't see the half below the camera. And that's not the novels. So imagine a person stepping in and then going, nope.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that happens.
Well, yeah.
And here's going to be a controversial statement. When Disney rebooted everything, those of us who had written for the EU had a lot of people reaching out to us. Aren't you outraged about this? I'm sure that a lot did. I know I did. I know others did. My reaction was not what a lot of people expected. My reaction, because I sit on both sides of the desk, I'm a fan and a writer, and I said, look, people who are writing when Rick Veitch wrote Dark Empire and so forth, and Tim Zahn was creating Thrawn, the Star Wars universe was pretty small. For them to be able to get caught up required that they read the Marvel comics, the newspaper strips, a half dozen novels that predated them. There wasn't a Star Wars 3D. Like, there wasn't a lot. You could conceivably do it in a month or two. For somebody who is writing for Star Wars as of the point that Disney took over, and they want to say, I want to submit a story. Well, how much do you know? Okay, I know some. What would I need to read? Like, that person is now going to be handed a list of thousands of stories. It was not, so for them to be able to come up with something new would be a lot more challenging. So the controversial statement is, I don't think Disney did the wrong thing. Now, I know EU fans may now hate me, but the truth is the EU still exists. All of that still exists. And it is a shame there were stories from the later end of the novels that didn't get resolved. That sucks. But if you start from the beginning, if you're somebody who says, I hate Disney, I will never watch or read anything Disney. So, okay, start from the beginning. Go back to that Alan Dean Foster novelization and start reading. You'll spend the next 6 years reading.
Yeah, easy.
Like, you will not run out of things to read. So it's still there.
I've been reading straight for 2 years, and it's like,
so you know what I mean?
I still haven't put a dent in it.
It's just, Star Wars is, look, science fiction, everything is a multiverse. In Star Trek, we actually have it worse than that, because in Star Wars, there were bumps along the way, like the planet Biss being destroyed twice. There were bumps along the way, but the EU was relatively pretty cohesive, which is what was unique and cool about it. Like you had the X-Wing books making reference to Star Wars 3D. That was unheard of. That sort of thing happening, right? And so that was cool. Or Ryder Wyndham referencing characters from the Archie Goodwin newspaper strips. Like, that was all really wild to see happening. In Star Trek, there are characters who have like 8 different fates, because nobody's like referencing each other's work, and so you go, oh, hey, they brought back this guy who's already died 5 times. But the way that I enjoy it is what I advise those who are frustrated about the Disney reboot. This is what I advise them. Remember that it's a multiverse. That character has 5 different fates because those are 5 different universes. It's that easy to reconcile. Different points, different timelines, Is it frustrating that they contradict? Of course it is. Is it frustrating that Han and Leia's kids were changed to Kylo Ren? Yeah, but that's because that's in a different timeline. Move on. It doesn't change the fact that Jason and Jaina exist.
Yeah.
It's just a different timeline.
Right. I
And I
agree.
know I'm probably pissing off half the listeners, and that's
No. No. This is great. This is what real conversations and how we feel of people
Mhm.
that help. Like you said, you're a part. I mean, that was what, the early 90s, mid 90s when the journals were a thing that started
So
coming out.
that would have been
96 ish.
90, something like that.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah, something
so,
like that.
I
Well,
mean,
you know what it is? The problem is I know when I wrote it versus when it came out. It was mid to late 90s. I don't remember the date that it came out though, but I know that it was the mid 90s when I was talking to Shar.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you were part of that shaping and molding and being a part of that experience and growing characters and talking about different species and the whole ball of wax. That's an incredible thing.
Thank you. I don't want to make it seem like I have a big head about this though. Like if you look at, I mean, in terms of cogs in the wheel, I'm barely a tiny little unused screw sitting on the workbench. I mean, I'm like, there are so many people who did so much more than I did.
Yeah. Well,
I had my contributions in the beginning days. Well,
that's
they
right.
weren't the beginning days because that would be the 70s, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
That's a big deal.
but
And
it was
that's
fun,
awesome.
and I'm very glad I did it. It was a fun era because there were a lot of us back then, like Abel Pena and me and Joe and Pablo. We were known for plugging the holes. That was kind of what there's two planets bis, there you go, hole plugged, right? Like it was that sort of thing where somebody would say, like, because we all joked around about it on the Usenet or an email, there's a continuity error in the latest novel, and then suddenly that person's writing a source article and there's the answer. And Abel was really good at that. Abel plugged more holes than a colander. He would find ways, when he and I were collaborating, like I would read his contributions to what we were collaborating on, and I'd start chuckling, and I'm like, man, you bastard, it wouldn't have even occurred to me to do that. That is awesome. Yes.
Well, I mean, some certain people have that eye for that tedious little
Hmm.
niche, and like you said, to plug in the holes, and that's great. Well, what's it like? I was always curious. What's it like co-writing or collaborating with someone? Like now, I envision this is me. I envision you guys all working in an office, and the walls are decorated, and there's ashtrays, and there's smoke,
No,
and the
it's
guy in the
it's
back's
what you're
got a
looking at
cigar.
right now, and then it's Abel sitting in California. So
Well, but what's that experience like? Do you is it a phone call, like I can imagine, or an
I mean,
email?
here's the thing. There's no pat answer to that because it varies for every single combination, right?
Sure.
So I really enjoy collaborating. I still do it to this day, and I haven't worked on Star Wars since IDW, since I worked on IDW's newspaper
The
strip
comic
reprint
strip.
books.
Yeah.
But so but I'm still doing other books and collaborating, and a good collaboration is awesome. A bad collaboration, not so much. But because there are some collaborations where you go, I'm doing 98% of the work. All right, whatever. But there are others that you just go, man, this is working really well. And so if you are lucky to get that, what it's like is a pool of imagination you're both pouring something into and you're both ladling out of. And so it's not one person pouring in and the other person drinking and going, this is tasty, because that's a really bad collaboration, right? You
Yeah.
both need to be pouring in. And so going back to my very first collaboration, which was Shar, she had a really cool idea for how to go about it. It's different than what I've worked on with others, but I liked it, which was we simply got on the phone, because this early days of internet, like people actually still called each other back then. But we got on the phone and we just basically said, all right, it's going to be a short story. It's not going to be that long, maybe 3,000 words. Let's say there are 8 scenes. How many words is that per scene? All right, let's come up with a 1-sentence breakdown of what each one is. Cool. I'm going to write scene 1 and send it to you. Read it, make the changes you think are needed, write scene 2. Send it back to me. I will make the changes I think are needed and send it back. And we did this. We just basically
bounce.
I write a scene, you write a scene, I write a scene. But then the challenge with that kind of collaboration is making sure the story has one voice, because the last thing you want is for the readers to be going, "What happened? I turned the page, and all of a sudden it's like someone else wrote this," right? So the reason why that kind of collaboration though was cool was that we weren't just reading what the previous person wrote; we were changing it. So by the time it's done, we both wrote it. And the best analogy I can come up with is marriage. So my wife and I have been together 36 years, 30 of them married. And when we got together, we were very different people, very different. Like, it's amazing that the two of us ended up together because we were extremely different. We're a lot alike now, and that's because we've been together 36 years, and we became not Rich and Jill, but Rich and Jill.
Yeah.
That's what ends up happening. If it's a good marriage, you both become a little more like the other, right? And that's kind of what happens in a good collaboration. So that story, Crimson Bounty, became Rich and Char. Like, it wasn't just two different people writing different scenes.
I totally understand.
If you're
what you're
lucky,
saying.
you get that, because sometimes you don't.
No,
The seams are visible to the readers that it was not a good collaboration.
Yeah. Well, that's congratulations to you and the missus, because that's good. 30 years.
Thank you.
It's a commitment,
Oh,
right?
she's awesome. My best friend.
Yeah, I feel the same. I've been married for 8, and yeah, we're different, but we read each other. We know, like, we've become, like you said, you become one. You know what the other one's kind of thinking at times, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, because you even if you're incredibly different, there are things about the other person that you like, and so you start to emulate those traits. And so, in essence, that becomes part of you, because you go, I really like their honesty. You become more honest. I really like their sense of humor. You become someone who laughs more. So by the time years have passed, neither one of you is the person who started dating. You are now a weird conglomeration blob creature of the traits of both of you. So
Waru, there you go.
Right.
So have you read all the EU? Like, were you?
Well, I read most of it. I started getting burnt out. I'm going to be totally honest about this. I was going crazy. I was reading everything, and and I mean everything. Like, I would find out, like, Applejack's droid strip. I hate Applejacks. I'm buying 3 boxes. I am getting that. Like, it was just, I will have the original, not a reprint. I still have it sitting on my shelves, a cutout of the back of the box. And so I'm like, I was reading everything, and I'm like, the mixed up droid. It's a silly story. I'm gonna definitely listen to that 16 times. So this was me. I was just embracing all of it, and the novels were starting to come out more frequently, and that's where things kind of fell apart for me, because when we went from the Thrawn books to Courtship of Princess Leia and Truce at Bakura and so forth, I was so excited. Each of these books came out, and I was like, I am reading this twice this week. I love this. There may be things about it that I don't think are as good, but I'm still really into this. And like those 6 young adult novels with Zorba the Hutt came out, and I'm like, but I still read them, and I read everything. And what ended up happening was Star Wars became massive again. And it seemed like every week somebody was releasing a Scholastic mail order only novel and a this only novel. And it was, now we're going to start a 30-book novel set on top of that. And it got to be a bit much. And then the prequels happened, and I enjoyed them, but I was not as enamored with those characters. And half the books were now about them. And I was like, something seems to have been a little diluted for me. And I kept reading, but then I found that the pile of stuff waiting for me to read started really building up.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get through it all. And I didn't. I got through most of it. I was, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the way through New Jedi Order when I started petering out.
Yeah, that's what I'm currently reading right now. Me and a couple friends.
I liked it. I think it was uneven. I think that I think that maybe I don't know, there was something off about it a little bit. Like I felt like, I don't know how you feel about it because you're reading it now. I mean, your perspective would be much better than mine on this, but I felt sometimes that it seemed a little disorganized.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The two books that James Luceno wrote really were very dull for me. The beginning books,
Which
the
is
R.A.
surprising
Salvatore.
because Luceno's a good author. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what really blew me away. I'm like, man, I was kind of like pushing through them.
See, I do know that there was some behind the scenes stuff with New Jedi Order. Like I don't. It's been years, so I can't. I can't, quote verse and line here, but I just remember at the time that like some series was supposed to be 3 but reduced to 2, and like there were a lot of things going on behind the scenes, like authors' books canceled. So I don't think New Jedi Order rolled out the way it was supposed to, if I remember correctly, and that might
Mm.
account for things.
Yeah, yeah, that's possible because the first three, R.A. Salvatore and then Michael Stackpole, they were great, just burnt like fire, and then hit them too, and it was like, and then Kathy Tyers, her book picked up, and now it's a little better. Now we're gonna move on to Greg Keyes, I believe,
Hmm.
Conquest or Edge of Victory. Well, I don't remember the titles, but it's like a 2-book series set.
But did you sometimes feel like it didn't flow well from one author to the next?
Yes.
Because that's what I meant when I said uneven. I felt like while I was reading it, sometimes I felt that like I was enjoying them, but I didn't feel like it was supposed to be one ongoing storyline, and it just felt a little disjointed to me.
Yeah.
Like maybe
I
there wasn't enough coordination behind the scenes or something.
Yeah, it felt a little. There were some hiccups and bumps in the road. That's
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
but I
I
enjoyed it. It
understand
was
what you're saying.
I enjoyed everything, even the stuff I didn't enjoy. I just it was too much. There was too much material, and keep in mind that was just one of several franchises I was reading.
Yeah.
And there was
So
also the fact that I had stopped writing for Star Wars by that point. And there was not as much of an urgency for me to keep reading everything as it came out. So it was building up. It was never like I said, "Oh, I hate this." It was building up where I was like, it's no longer urgent. And suddenly I look and that pile is getting bigger and bigger. And, and then,
yeah,
all right, why am I spending my money on this? I'm not reading them. That's kind of what happened.
yeah. I get what I can understand what you're saying
But
because
during the pandemic, though, I started over from the beginning. I went back and read all of Marvel, all the newspaper strips, a large chunk of Dark Horse. I petered out because I I read way too much Star Wars way too fast, and I will get back to it soon. But I am enjoying recapturing my love for that stuff. But I do find that it's the earlier days of the franchise that really work best for me.
I was just gonna ask you that. It sounds like to me so far it's like the very beginning of the is
So
what grabs you.
here's why I think part of this has to do with age. People who got into Star Wars in the 90s, at the end of that decade, they got the special editions and they got the prequels, and it was a huge thing. It might be their Star Wars in the same way that somebody who started watching James Bond films in the 70s, Roger Moore is their James Bond, and somebody who started in the 2000s, Daniel Craig is their Daniel Craig. For me, my Batman is Michael Keaton. I watched Adam West, but Michael Keaton was the thing. He was the bomb. He still is. And
Yes, sir.
I actually think every actor since him has been good, even if the material they were given, like Clooney, was terrible. It's just that Michael Keaton, though, is Batman for me. And I think,
100%.
yeah, so that's where I think I'm at with Star Wars. See, for me, when I jumped into to the EU, there wasn't a lot of material. And the trilogy that I grew up with was the original. I'm 55, so for me, I was just about to turn 10 when the first film came out, and so I grew up with the original trilogy and the Ewok TV movies and the Droids cartoon. This is the stuff I grew up with, and so stuff that involves that cast and that era is for me the golden stuff. That's what I get into the most. And although I do really enjoy the expanded stuff, like the Tales of the Jedi was wonderful. So getting to see 4,000 and 5,000 years earlier was really cool. But again, that's 4,000 and 5,000 years before the time of Luke Skywalker. It's still built around the original trilogy, right?
Yeah.
So we get to the prequels, and while there are things about them that I like a lot, like, I don't, on screen, I don't care about the character of Mace Windu. I think he's kind of dull on screen. In the novels, really cool character.
Badass.
On Clone Wars, awesome. But
Yeah.
if you make Sam Jackson boring, that's a pretty big achievement. Like, it's not an easy thing to make Sam Jackson boring. So the movies kind of failed him. And I don't blame him. Like, Sam Jackson is not inherently boring.
Right.
Or the fact that Padme is a little off. And Natalie Portman, is an Oscar-worthy actress.
Right.
So something is wrong when you take Natalie Portman and Sam Jackson and make them duds. Like, that doesn't work, right? It shouldn't be like that. And so these movies didn't compel me to want to know Padme's story. Whereas Marvel's Weapon Master, a Weapons Master, a story of Leia's youth, sign me up. Like, I wanted to know more about her.
Yeah.
Marvel is doing a story about Ben Kenobi during his days as a Jedi Knight. I will read that for the rest of the night. I'm going to just keep rereading it because that's awesome. Weirdly enough, that exact same character, Ben Kenobi, is less interesting to me in the prequel era, and he shouldn't be, because Ewan McGregor is fantastic and he was perfectly cast. There's nobody in that trilogy, I think, that's better cast than him. But I don't know that maybe the luster had gone out before me by that point. I don't know. And I stayed with it. Look, it's after that point that I started collecting the figures, and and the IDW books that I did were a decade later. So I mean, I stayed with it, and pandemic told me I'm rereading everything, right? So my love is still there. I still watch all the shows, but I don't know, that
it just
golden
doesn't
age
grab you. That magic,
it is
that magic feeling, like we were talking about.
Like,
I understand what you're
Andor
saying.
is amazing. I loved Andor, absolutely loved it. But I'm not running out and buying Andor comics if they exist. I don't even know if they exist, and that says something. If I haven't followed, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like, it's, but like my mania is different now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Andor has got a lot of mixed. Just to touch on that, I personally I wasn't a fan of it. Not that it looked great.
Mm-hmm.
The actors and actresses did a great job, but I don't know. I guess I was looking for that magic spark. Like Rogue One was really good.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that Andor's finale we already know.
Well, yeah, there's that too, right? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know it's not for everybody. I know there were people who thought Obi-Wan was the best of the shows, and I go, really? But
that really wasn't that. I loved it because it brought them characters back, and Ewan McGregor, like you were talking about, and Hayden Christensen came back, and it was great. But you're right. I feel like they dropped the ball with that. I mean, it's Kenobi, right? It should have
been better. Here's the thing. I found things I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to a franchise. Like, I will reread crap, right? So
sure.
I have bootleg DVDs of the entire Ewoks cartoon series, and I've watched them more than once and have written about them. So I am not a person who is like elitist and says, "Bah, Disney era." It's just
right.
It's just I can watch. I've watched every show, and even shows like Ahsoka and Kenobi that I want to love because they involve characters that I do love. I can find things to enjoy about them, but I also have to admit that both those shows made me go meh at times, and I shouldn't be saying meh about the best character in the prequels, Kenobi, and the best character in Clone Wars, Ahsoka. Like, I shouldn't be saying meh about anything involving them, right? And so, but I watched everything Star Wars with my son. Since he was a child, he's now an adult, and since he was a child, we've always done Star Wars together. So every episode comes out, every film comes out, we watch them. We sort of look at each other, like waiting for that spark to be there again. And
that moment, yeah.
And sometimes it is. We both really liked Andor. We liked parts of Kenobi and Ahsoka. We thought the casting was very good on Ahsoka, but the writing wasn't. I don't know how you feel about that, but I thought the casting was dead on for the most part. But the characters had nothing to do. Hera just stood around with gratuitous butt shots.
Yeah.
Now, if they gave that actor something to do other than stand around with gratuitous butt shots, Like that might have actually been a good character, but she didn't do anything.
I agree 100% on there.
Yeah.
I so far I think Ahsoka's been the best that they've done so far. I watch it all too. I'm not just a fan of the expanded universe. I'm a fan of the Star Wars in general.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things that we can like and not like, and that's fine.
Right.
I thought it was great, but like there are moments like Hera didn't do a thing for me.
No,
I
she
thought
just stood there. Like it was
I
like, what was
thought
the point of bringing her back?
I thought the ending was very like the last episode when he comes back and he's got the stormtrooper helmet on and
I
they're
mean, when
just
he was
standing there.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like Balin Skull on the other hand, Ray Stevenson, that's terrible that we lost him now, but his character was just amazing.
See, I see his character as the one that had the most potential.
Yeah.
And I still, again, wish they gave him more to do than to stand around staring meaningfully.
That stoicness.
Yeah, because I felt like half the show was the characters staring meaningfully. Even Ahsoka, an action-based character, spent most of her time with her arms crossed, smirking meaningfully. And I felt like you don't take Ahsoka and then remove the action. This is a person who, yeah, okay, she's gotten older. I understand that she's not the impulsive little kid. She's certainly not Snips anymore. But that character has enormous growth in the course of Clone Wars. And then we get to this, and I don't know, it just something didn't click. And I love Rosario Dawson. I think she's perfectly cast. Give her something better to do. That's what I say. I'm hopeful that season 2 will give her more to do.
Well, what did you think about the flashback episode? Let me ask you that.
So I just sat there with a giddy grin on my face the whole time.
Me too.
I really felt like this is what the whole show should have been. Like this was a perfect encapsulation of Clone Wars. Seeing Hayden Christensen playing the version of Anakin from the cartoon was just a mind twister because I love Clone Wars after season 1, and in rewatches I've come to love season 1 too. But I could never quite reconcile that the Anakin from the cartoon was Hayden Christensen. Like his whole inflection is different. The very fact that his big angst in the movies is they won't make him a master, but he's got a Padawan. Like there are things about Clone Wars in the movies that don't really connect, even though I love it.
Yep.
And then we get to that episode, and suddenly it all fell into place. I'm like, oh no. I totally buy now that that's Hayden Christensen because I just saw him play that version of the character. But the coolest thing about the entire show was the girl playing young Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah.
Who was so dead on to the animated Ahsoka. But the problem there is you go back, then you end the flashback and come to the present and you realize that they're not writing Rosario Dawson
they don't.
the same way.
Right.
Yeah. So it's I don't know.
Well, that could have been maybe possibly just because of the age thing, the time difference there.
And I get that. And I don't think people should be static. I think, as a writer, I think that would be the biggest mistake is keeping people static. It's boring.
Yeah.
But I don't buy that she's become somebody who's just kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
I don't buy that that's what Ahsoka would become, I don't know.
I thought the Night Sisters were cool. I thought the zombie troopers were cool.
I think seeing live action Night Sisters was wild, especially because I really felt like they played it up the way the Clone Wars did with Mother Tenzin. I thought that was cool. That was really well done.
I thought the Blade of Talzin looked incredible too.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was done very well. So yeah, I mean I don't know. Do you think possibly, I was going to pick your brain on this too about like digital media, but we'll get into this, but do you think maybe it's just because of how everything now is like a streaming, they want it to be a series, a show, rather than like the movie industry and creating the big blockbusters kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of a dud. Like really the only big movie to me that's like really was like, wow, was Top Gun Maverick. I don't know if you've watched that or not, but
you and I have been pretty in sync up until now. I think the original Top Gun is the very worst movie made in the entire decade of the 80s, and so I can't bring myself to watch Top Gun Maverick.
Come on, it's got Kenny Loggins, man,
with
the Danger
a horrible
Zone.
passion. I just hated the film.
Really?
Yeah, when Maverick came out, my wife wanted to see it, and I guess Tom Cruise has more appeal to her than me. I don't know, but she wanted to see it, and my son had never seen the original, and so my son and I tried. And I warned him, like, Josh, I got to tell you, this is the worst movie ever made. Like, imagine the worst movie ever made, and now imagine that it's been cloned and it's sitting next to each other. And I'm like, I'm like, but if you want, we will watch the original on streaming, and if you still want to see it, I will go. The three of us will go see this. And 15 minutes in, he's just looking at me with this pained expression on his face, like, what are we? What is this?
What did I sign up for?
Yeah, and half an hour, and he's like, I can't do anymore. And I said, thank you. You are my son. And I couldn't do it. So no. Did I miss a great movie? Potentially, but I just hated the original so much I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I watched a lot of 80s movies growing up. I mean, that's I loved that whole era in the early 90s. There was back to being something magical and special about a lot of the actors.
The 80s were my teen years. So yes, I love the 80s.
You probably had a great time. That's what, the 80s. I was born in 84, so I kind of missed that. But
yeah, exactly. So for you, it was that like your childhood, your young childhood was the 80s. Yeah. I turned 20 in the 80s, so it was a very different experience for me.
Well, I was just saying, in the thought process of everything is like everybody's searching for like the Stranger Things.
Oh yeah. That's why I love Stranger Things.
I mean, you're right.
It's back to when I was a teenager. That was glorious.
But do you see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like they're trying to do that now with everything, and they're not really putting that, like you said, maybe it's the writing, the production.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who knows what it is? I know Disney Plus is going up in price, which I'm not very, very happy about.
I wish there weren't, like, there are a lot of things on Disney that I enjoy, so I'm going to pay it. But I wish that wasn't the case, because now Doctor Who's going to be there. Like so many things that I watch.
They're there.
Yeah.
But so what do you think though? Do you think that's kind of they're chasing that series?
I do, and
achievement.
You've hit on a question that my son and I have actually discussed, because we feel like with each of the shows, and even our favorite one, Mandalorian started off so well, but we feel like each of the shows has suffered from the middle episodes. Like, we feel like it just sort of dangles for a while before it picks up again, and then suddenly there's this really easy fix to kill the villain or to defeat the villain. And it seems like what they're trying to do is to create Game of Thrones with every single version of the show. So introduce a lot of characters, have them be angsty and mean to each other, and then calm before the storm, and then all hell breaks loose, right? And it seems like this pattern keeps repeating, instead of saying, let's tell a story that is good from beginning to end.
Yeah.
And the original trilogy is not perfect. I mean, I think we all know that entire books have been written on the fact that George Lucas was a visionary creator in terms of franchises, but not the best actor director. And even the cast themselves have said this. And so that's why you end up with things like, the X-Wing pilots delivering some very cringeworthy lines during the Death Star briefing, or Luke being kind of weirdly whiny, given the fact that Mark Hamill is a really good actor. And so you watch the whininess and you go, how is that Mark? All right. That sort of thing. It's because Lucas was a phenomenal idea guy, but not a great actor director. So he would let things through that really probably needed another pass.
Yeah.
So it is not a perfect trilogy, but it is a really good trilogy. And each of the three films, even with the Ewoks, each of the three films are enjoyable from the moment you put it on until you get to the end. It's a roller. It is a movie version of a roller coaster ride. And I kind of feel like that's what we've sacrificed. That's what, in our effort to have Game of Thrones every show, we end up with lulls that shouldn't be there. Now, I don't mean that everything has to be, bang, bam, boom, because look, even the original movie had moments when Luke is looking up into the sky at the twin suns, but that's for a very specific narrative purpose. That's to set up. That's so the audience can take a breath before the next crazy crap happens.
Yeah.
When it goes on for 2 or 3 episodes in a row and introduces red herrings that don't make like it's too long of a lull.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I totally feel you.
Yeah. And I think they keep making the same mistake, but I also think it's happening with the MCU shows. So like I think it's something in the mindset above Lucasfilm and above Marvel. It's something in the Disney range, I would think. I could be wrong though.
No, that sounds like it could be pretty accurate in my opinion. Because I kind of stopped watching the MCU stuff because it just didn't feel right. Like it
I'm
didn't.
still watching all of it. I'm a sucker. I'm still watching all of it, and the same goes for Star Wars. And each time I go, this could have been better. I enjoyed it, but this could have been better. It keeps happening. I wish that I didn't keep walking away with that feeling, because I am easy to please. I will watch it if I find it enjoyable, but I want to be blown away.
Yes, I agree.
So this is Star Wars. This isn't This isn't like Earth 2, right? This isn't like something that was a fun science fiction jaunt. No, this is Star Wars, right? Like you're supposed to sit there and just go.
Yeah, well, that's
right?
what we all want.
Yeah, right.
I think maybe they see that it's just a money grab. Even going back to the figures, it's so darn expensive now to collect.
I'm so glad I gave that up.
I mean,
I would have had to sell Josh by now.
I'm sure he's gonna like to hear that. But like the Black Series figures, they're incredible and they're done very well. But it's like $30 a pop now, and it's like.
See, I would have had to drop out before that point anyway, because that offends me. $30 a figure.
Yeah, it's tough. So I'm very picky and choosy now with certain things. But
I'm willing to bet a lot of them are the same figures as before, right? There's probably more Hans and more Lukes.
Yeah, they've redone them all and special editions and 40th anniversaries and.
I wish I had taken pictures, because I would show you what it looks like to have like 45 Hans all doing this in a black vest. It looks ridiculous, but cool at the same time.
I was going to ask you
they're all
if you had
slightly
pictures.
different. Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be so cool.
But every time I would get self-conscious. That wasn't the shelf I liked looking at. For me, the most fun was looking at all the R2 droids, all the astromechs, because there were so many different shapes and colors. That was cool.
I bet you, yeah.
Or even the Ewok shelf. That was fun, because I had it themed. Like I had a shelf. It was just shelves lining everything. So I had like
that right there.
What's that? There you go. Love it.
It's Diet Coke in here, not a beer. So
I'm going to freely admit that I don't think that the Ewoks were the franchise killer everybody thinks they were. No. I think they weren't done right, but I get what he was doing.
Well, yeah, they were for kids, trying to give that.
Well, there's that too. But what I mean is, I understand from a narrative standpoint what he was doing. It was the idea of Vietnam. It was the idea of underestimating somebody on their own turf.
Oh, yeah.
So I understand where he was going with this. Like an imperialistic body moves in and thinks that they're going to win immediately because these savages, bah. But the truth is, you're on their turf, and it doesn't go the way you expect. So, like, I get what he's doing after he had done 2 previous movies with the Empire being portrayed in literal Nazi type outfits with names like Stormtrooper. The third one takes it a step further and says, well, it's not just the Nazis. We did this, right? And we lost. And there you go. And so it was a comment about government in general and how they can make really dumb decisions or bad decisions. And so I get it. Now they just happen to look like the most adorable little fur balls ever. And that's where it went wrong, because then it became for children. But yeah.
Well, yeah, to kind of get it in there and in a lighter tone. But it's amazing to me that Star Wars has so many reality references to it and things of the past and history. How he did that.
Yeah, and it's clearly on purpose. I mean, it's not like it's accidental. I felt like for a while, every time I saw an interview with Lucas, there was like you would mention, a different influence for A New Hope. There are so many things that influenced, the creation of Star Wars. It's wild.
Yeah. What's your favorite out of the 3 original?
Oh, it's my favorite Star Wars period, The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that so I have friends who do a podcast, and they always close whatever it is that they're discussing. They ask the question, is it Jaws? And the reason they do that is that for them, Jaws is a 4-star movie. And so, like, is it Jaws? No, it's more of a Jaws 2. It's more of a Jaws. This is a Jaws 4. Like, that's how bad it is. And so every time I've been on their podcast, they've gone, so Rich, this time we discussed, Battlestar Galactica, is it Jaws? I'm like, I'd give it a solid Jaws, But anyway, so when I watch the modern day Star Wars, I'm asking myself, is it The Empire Strikes Back? And every now and then I will go, that was The Empire Strikes Back.
That was it, eh?
Yeah. But more often than not, I find myself going, that was kind of Attack of the Clones.
Well, now I know your rating scale for where Attack of the Clones fits in now.
It's funny because I know that some people rank it higher. For me, I think because people trash Phantom Menace, and I like Phantom Menace.
I do too. It's my favorite.
Flaws aside, people rank. I think it's fun. Attack of the Clones, to me, just I don't even know where to begin. Because I don't like skewing negative in interviews. But there's just so much about that film that irks me.
A lot of people, I think that's out of the prequels. A lot of people feel like Attack of the Clones is the it's the bottom of the
It
rating
has
scale.
so many good ideas that aren't well carried out, and so many scenes that are clearly geared towards selling toys or selling play sets or video games or whatever. And I like that entire droid factory scene feels like it was like, did you enjoy this? Coming soon, the video game.
Yeah.
Like it just like there were so many scenes where I felt like I was like, and then we add in things like the fact that Lucas really didn't give Christensen guidance on his acting, and so he's dull. I was floored at how good he has been in recent years, coming back and directed by other people. And I go, damn, the performances we missed out on in the prequels are really staggering. We got it sort of in Revenge of the Sith, because at that point, Christensen, I think, saw I feel bad for the guy because he seems like a really nice guy, but I think he saw the flack after Attack of the Clones and made a point of trying to do better without the director telling him what to do. But and so in Revenge of the Sith, I think his performance is a lot better. But Attack of the Clones, some of it is a little cringy for me.
Yeah, a lot of people say the dialogue, and and I kind of, when you're a teenager, right? Because he's supposed to be a teenager in that part of the show, and it's like, yeah, when you're trying to talk to girls or something, you try to think back when you were a teenager. You weren't Rico Suave,
no,
ladies
but he's
man,
downright creepy.
Yeah, there's some moments that are.
There's also the fact that Padme is keeping him at arm's length until he commits arguably genocide. At which point she says, "I truly, madly, deeply love you."
Yeah.
Right? Really? Was that what you were waiting for? Because okay, well,
here we go.
No, I can't. I was your babysitter. Stay away. I can't. You go, you killed children? I love you. Like, it's a weird character choice. It really is. Yeah.
When we were talking about the original trilogy, you did an article about the radio dramas.
I did.
I think them are fantastic.
You just pulled up something from decades ago. Wow, yeah.
Well, I do my research, sir. But I really personally love the radio dramas. I listen to them from time to time at work, when I'm at work, because it's just, they're so damn good.
I think I interviewed David Alan Grier for that. He played one of the extras, if I remember correctly. Keep on, I'm not even like in that mindset anymore. I'm trying to think of who I interviewed for that. So I interviewed Han. I think I spoke to Billy D. Williams' rep. It's been so many years. I'm sorry, but I know
it was a while ago.
But I spoke to I
didn't personally read the article.
You what? Sorry,
I don't have that article. I don't have that insider.
Oh, I see.
But it was
a retrospective about all the actors who were in it. Basically, the other people who played the main characters, because other than a few of them, most of the actors were different.
Right.
and David Alan Grier was coming off of In Living Color, and he had done a lot of comedies back then. But before all that, he played like Stormtrooper number 5 or something. And I thought, like, he was a big name at the time that I was doing this article, and I thought it would be hilarious while I'm interviewing the other cast members who played, Leia and Han and Luke, to interview Stormtrooper number 5, who was arguably the most famous person in the cast. So I was like, all right. So I managed to get him, and I spoke to his rep, who said, David thinks it's hilarious. We're going to do this interview. He's like, nobody has ever interviewed him about the Star Wars character that he did, or even realized it was him. He's in his glory right now. So they put me through to him, and he was on a car phone. He's like, man, I got to tell you, this is hilarious to me. I never, I get, people want to talk about In Living Color, and I'm beyond that. And they want to, but you're telling me you want to talk to me about me walking in and saying, yes, sir. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Well, he's like, that's hilarious. No one would ever do that. So I interviewed the guy who had no useful lines, but because he was David Alan Grier, and I thought, everybody reading the article when that came out would go, ha, David Alan Grier, that's hilarious. Yeah,
so
that for me was the highlight, was interviewing somebody who you'd never think to interview for that.
Yeah, but that's for like fans, and that's like a geek out thing for us. It's like, holy crap, here's the, that's cool, and we love that.
And Ed Asner did the voice of Jabba in Return of the Jedi, and I thought that was a hilarious casting piece, because Ed Asner was a serious Emmy-nominated actor, and Jabba is just a guy who goes Boshuda. You're like, why would you could have anybody with a deep voice do this? You're hiring this extraordinary actor, and I'm realizing now when I said David, obviously Ed Asner was the most famous. I forgot that for a second, but so I tried to interview him, and it turned out that he was in, I don't remember. He was traveling somewhere abroad, and he had no access to phones. He had just basically gone dark for a month just to get to relax. And so we did an interview via fax. His manager said, can you fax some questions? And I'm like, this one I'm going to remember. 25 years from now, when podcasts exist, so I'm going to have to tell the story. Because I just did a fax interview. Has anyone ever done a fax interview with a celebrity before? But I interviewed Ed Asner, and one of my questions was a little tongue in cheek, and I was glad that he saw it for what it was and not a dumb question, which was, how does one prepare to do the voice of a giant slug? If you're someone like you, who is known for taking roles very seriously, you can prepare for playing a newspaper editor or a police chief, or an old man at an old folks home who's looking back on his life. How do you prepare for playing a giant, disgusting slug? It's all handwritten, right? And he writes, I ate 16,000 gallons of ice cream. It was. It was something like that. I don't know word for word, but that was his answer, and I thought that was just really funny. And
that's incredible.
I'm pretty sure that I worked in the exact wording, whatever it was. But I'm he either thinks I'm a complete imbecile or he got the tone of the question. I can't tell.
Well, that's got to go down in the history books as via fax. Interview.
So that was.
I actually reached out to John Lithgow, who voiced Yoda in The Empire, and
I don't remember if I interviewed him or not. I don't remember.
His rep got back to me. He's out of the country doing a film, so maybe that's the easiest way of saying, well, Stevie B, you're a nobody, so no thanks. But it was still cool they got back to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's more than a lot of them do. Which I think points to the fact that you may have more of a presence than you realize, because either that rep was being truthful, he's not available,
right,
or they realized you were somebody that they should reach out to.
Yeah, so I know. I took it that way too, but it's just, because I don't want nobody to come into this being stressed, or I'm not going to ask some ridiculous question and put somebody on the spot, because that's not it. I just want to have a fun conversation and get some history and story. Like, you have a lot of great stories to tell. I had no idea you had a bajillion figures on the wall staring at you, and then you turned it into a new bathroom.
Right. How many people are going to give you that one? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny that back then I enjoyed working for the EU. And I'm a guy. If you ever look at a list of my credits, I'm a guy who enjoys puns. And so one of the things I really enjoyed doing when I was writing for the Insider and for Tops was coming up with titles like "Looking for Love in Alderaan Places," and it was an article about, at that point, every woman in the comics and novels Luke had become enamored with. So like if I saw a chance to have the dumbest title possible in an article, I ran with it and hoped that the editor wouldn't go, "You're an idiot, Rich." And more often than not, they let it go. So,
Well, let me ask you this now, since you're
Mhm.
talking about that, because you got a fantastic career, an ongoing career that you're still making magic happen, but
Well,
you do a lot of editing too.
mhm.
So how do you like give us some like I'm assuming the editor side of things is a little bit more tedious. It could be fun because you're getting to experience things, but also coming up with creative ideas. So when go ahead.
No, I'm just taking in your question. You go ahead.
So like when it comes to okay, I need to turn the editor cap off and put on the writing cap. Like, is there a different? Is there a different just like over the top when Stallone turns it and he's getting ready to arm wrestle?
Um, I think the line is a little blurred sometimes, but sometimes it is what you're describing. So, and part of the reason the line is blurred is that a lot of the stuff that I edit, I also contribute to. Like, I've done a lot of essay anthologies for different publishers, and I will always write something for them. So the line is blurred in that I'm also one of the writers, and one of the reasons I like to do that is it prevents ivory towers. Like I'm just one of the people in the book. I also happen to be the one reading signing and reading the essays, but I have a vested interest in the book being fun because I want to enjoy writing for it. And I would hope that if not everybody, then at least the vast majority of people who have written for my anthologies have come away feeling it was a fun experience. Because for me, if someone sees me as the kind of editor that I hated having from time to time, then I failed. I don't want that. I want people to see me as an editor that they had a good collaborative, imaginative relationship with, that there was free flowing exchange of ideas, that I wasn't too heavy handed, that I wasn't too lax, because some people just they do need editors, and like it's an old maxim with writing is the last thing you should ever be is your own editor.
Yeah.
Um, in very early on, I was a very green writer. I have trouble reading stuff, even Crimson Bounty. I have trouble reading it because I'm not the same writer I was 30 years ago. You get better at it as you go along, and if you're a young writer, or if you're a 98-year-old writer, and I'm not there yet. Hopefully, I live that long, but I will still need an editor. Um, now, for the last 30 years, my day job has been editing. So, of course, I value editors. Otherwise, I don't value myself. But I've always tried to be able to be on both sides of the desk, wear both those caps, and never forget what it's like on the other side of that desk. I think the fact that I haven't been just one or the other makes that a little easier, because I have editors. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm an editor, but I have multiple editors in addition to that. So it's humbling, and I think being humbled is good.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I received edits on a short story that I haven't announced yet, so I can't say anything. But I was asked to change some things, and I was like, okay. But it's good for the soul to be told to do that, because then you remember, look, you're not Shakespeare. Even Shakespeare, wasn't Shakespeare. Like, he wrote some duds, and people probably told him, fix this, and then it was good, right? So, it's good for the soul.
Yeah. That was very poetic. How you said that. That was very good. And I totally understand what you're saying. And
Mhm.
you mentioned the word they're humble. And I
Mhm.
totally feel that from you. Like you're just I'd want to work for you. I have no writing experience at all, but it's like this is a guy I want to work with. Because that we need that
Thank
though.
you.
You have the experience on both sides of the spectrum. And
Mhm.
that probably really helps. And it's probably why that you've done all these things through the years. And like
But
you said, you
Oh,
get
complete.
better.
I'm
I was
cutting
just saying that, and you just like you age like fine wine. You know,
uh, or smell like fine cheese, one or the other.
yeah, Limburger.
One of the things I really enjoyed about the prequels, as flawed as they were at times, one of the concepts I really enjoyed was the idea that after watching the original trilogy, we had it in our heads that the Jedi were ultimately just a pure source of good and they'd been wronged. And then you see that they live in a literal ivory tower and are removed from the way the universe is working, so much so that they're hanging out on Sundays with a Sith Lord and don't realize it. That's how removed they've become. They've become ineffective, right? I think that, and it's very clearly a statement about ivory towers. And I think the mistake that an editor or a publisher can make is to become an ivory tower. You need to be able to relate to writers, and the easiest way to do that is to be a writer. And as a writer, you need to be able to understand that your editor, if the editor is worth working with, is not just being a dick to tell you to change things. You're too close to your own writing to be your own editor. So you write what you think is a great line, and you're sitting there cracking up about how just so remarkably so clever you are. Everyone's going to love this. And you send it to a beta reader or an editor, and they go, "This is the first thing I would remove. No offense, it's cheesy," and you just feel like someone shot you in the heart with a harpoon because that was the best line in the story. And what do you know? But then you step back and you go, "Huh." Yeah, that's kind of a dumb line, isn't it? Like because like you need someone to tell you that line didn't resonate the way you think it did, and here's why. And then you go, okay, I see. And I'll give you a really good example of this as to why I'm able to keep that perspective. 3 different things that I wrote for Star Wars. I included what I thought was a very funny joke, and it got nixed every time. Different writer each time, and I was so just chafed over this, right? I thought it was hilarious. I created a band. I just kept people having characters make reference to a band called the Palpitones. I thought that was funny. A rock, like a music band called the Palpitones. And then after the first 2 editors said, "Yeah, that's dumb," the third one explained why. He said, "Can you imagine anybody in Nazi Germany making a popular band name mocking Hitler? What would happen to them?" And I'm like, oh yeah.
That's
I guess
probably
that's
right.
true. The emperor really wouldn't go for the Palpitones, would he? I hadn't thought about it until someone said, Palpatone is Lucas's comment on Hitler, and he's far worse. He's wiping out planets, and you're going to tell me that the Palpitones wouldn't be killed? I'm like, oh yeah, that's a shame. You're right.
The
But that's what it
Palpitonians.
took for me to realize. Yeah, no, don't mention the Palpitones anymore. Stop that.
But it sounds funny. I mean, it's
The
clever.
name just struck me, and I thought it was amusing. The funny thing is, though, I kind of won in the end because as I remember, and I'd have to check. So one of the things I'm kind of proudest of with the EU is that I wrote the backstory for the I expanded the backstory. I didn't create some of it for the Max Rebo band.
I was going to run into that. Yeah.
And I did that for the Insider and then also for the Fact Files. And I think it was the Fact Files article, I think, that I snuck in that one of the members of the band had been in a group called the Palpitones. And then I was like, are they gonna? Just because I'm like, damn it, I'm winning this one. And
Yeah.
I think that it went through. But if somebody looks it up and it's not in there, then I'm just misremembering because I'm a crazy old dude. I'm a crazy old wizard. Yeah.
We got some insight in it now, though. That's for sure. Because that's cool. Do you still have the old insiders and things that you wrote?
So here's the thing. I had a basement flood several years ago.
Oh.
And I have most of what I wrote. I have every book that I wrote or contributed to. I have most of the magazines and all my comics work, but I don't have all the magazines. And I don't have all the newspapers, and that's irretrievable. Like getting it, that's gone. But frankly, I don't really care. But what like there are issues in the Insider and the Star Trek Communicator, and a lot of fact files that I don't have. And one of these days, And people, we all have one of these days. We all do that.
Yeah.
But one of these days, I'm going to figure out what I don't have and scour eBay. It's not high on my list right now because I'm busy. but it's something like when it comes up and then I cringe and go, I really need to do that. I'm not going to live forever. But yeah.
So it's an achievement you want to get eventually one day.
It's the cockiness I allow myself. Like I have a rich shelf where it's got everything that I published, except it doesn't because it's missing things, and that's the cockiness I allow myself, is to be able to look at that and smile. But I think most authors do that. I think most authors have a me shelf.
Well, you should. I mean, would.
So some are very humble, and I try to model myself to them, and I fail because despite what you said before, so parts of me are really not humble. Parts of me get arrogant, and then I feel bad about it, and then I humble myself. But I recently wrote an article for Star Trek, because right now I'm one of the writers for Star Trek Explorer magazine, and for an upcoming issue, I interviewed the widow of Thomas Warkentin, who was the first writer-artist on the Star Trek newspaper ships. At the same time that the LA Times Syndicate was doing Star Wars, they were also doing Star Trek, and she said something that was really interesting to me. She said that Thomas had won an Emmy. He was involved in television animation through a ton of different shows in the 80s, and his team won an Emmy, and that he'd also had a gold record, and that she didn't even know where they were because he didn't care about accolades. So like he had his work, and his work mattered to him, but like, where was his gold record certificate? She had no idea, and she didn't know what had happened to the Emmy because he probably shoved it in a drawer somewhere and then threw it out, because for him the accolades just didn't matter. So for me, like, that me shelf is just me saying I love that I have work, but I don't really care about the accolades. Hearing him say that, I was glad, because it reminded me that that's how you're supposed to be. If you start getting arrogant, dude, you're nobody. Remember how Thomas Warkentin looked at it, So that's what it's good to be reminded of stuff like that.
That's good. Kind of almost reverts back to before, how you were saying thinking outside the box. When you get that wound in the heart from saying, no, that's garbage, or that doesn't fit, and then you're like, wait a minute. Oh yeah, maybe
you're right.
Okay,
that was a dumb line.
And
the problem is that some of those dumb lines made it in, right? And so it's part of the problem with reading stuff when you're not quite a spring space chicken anymore, and you go back and read stuff from when you were a young space pup, and you go, how did anyone allow me to write? Oh my God, that's terrible. Like, how did the editor not fix that line? That's a stupid line. But it's now part of my legacy, that really stupid line. And, so it's hard for me because I'm very self-critical as a writer, very. When I turn something into an editor, I've probably read it 30 times. And because I'm very critical of it. It has to be, if I write something that's 26,000 words and I reread it and I'm up to like word 24,000 and I change a word, I have to reread it. I have to get through it without changing it before I'll turn it in. So when I go and I read the early stuff and I see 18 things I would change, it's difficult for me to enjoy it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you, like, before you submit something in, if you very meticulously go through and...
Very. I some writers will have multiple drafts, but that's never how I've worked. So, like some writers on their computer, they'll have a folder and they'll have draft 1, draft 2, draft 2.0, draft 1, and they'll have I have older versions because I periodically save them just in case just so I have the stuff there. But in the process of writing a draft, I will change it 1,000 times. And it makes it difficult because every now and then I'll delete something and later on go, I really should have kept that. I don't remember what the exact wording was. Darn, that was a good line. But it's like in that flow, in that moment, I'm like, nope, cut. I'm like, Edward Scissorhands, cutting a bush. And then later on, I'm like, no, I got to keep some of those trimmings, but they're gone, too late. But so when I turn something in, it technically has gone through a lot of drafts. But it's still exactly the same file I was working on the whole time.
The original.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was curious about that because that's probably how I would be too. Before, to try to prevent them wounds.
Yeah, I think every writer goes through their own process. And one thing I've found as an editor is not every writer has effective processes. I will not name names on this one because I have so much respect for everybody I work with. But sometimes there are writers who I will continually invite back to everything I do because they turn in something and maybe I changed one TEH to THE and otherwise I changed nothing because they're just a thrill to edit because what they turn in is the cleanest, most well-written stuff you've ever read. And then there are other writers where you go, oof, dude, you have so many good ideas here, but you just spelled the PP62. Like, what happened there? You know, and it's like, but you know, like, so every writer has a different. And as an editor, you have to go in knowing that you have to be just as respectful and gracious when the person is a mid-range writer as they are when they're a great writer. Because part of being an editor is also it's about helping. It's not just saying my name's on the cover, so be good. Right. No, that's not it at all. It's, you know, like we're doing something together. And in the end, my job is to make sure you look good, not me.
Right. That's and plus it probably helps to really have that great relationship, you know, and build upon it because yeah, you're right. You're helping it achieve rather than cut down.
Yeah. Yeah. It's every part of the book, every contributor to the book to me is on equal terms. Like we're all there to put forward. If there's 20 essays, so then you have the 20 essayists, and usually I'll do an essay anthology with a co-editor because it is too easy for me to miss typos if I am immersed in something.
Yeah.
So having a co-editor who can catch that and also will have perspectives on the wording that I only have my own perspective. So figure 20, if there's 20 essays, it's plus the 2 editors, and maybe we'll have if we can find somebody, a big name to do a forward. So now you have 23 contributors, and every one of those voices is important for getting the book to be good, right? Yeah. And so any editor who looks at that and says, this is about me because my name is on the cover is an asshole. Because your name may be on the cover, but there are far more people inside, and without them, you'd have just a cover.
You just say, yep. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've done a lot of chronology work, too, for different, you know.
Yeah, that's because I'm insane. My first published book was a Planet of the Apes chronology. And that was an insane amount of work, and that came out before the current films. I mean, the existing trilogy with Andy Serkis. So like, you know, and the Boom Studios comics, all of that, it predated all that. So it'd be twice as much work if I had written it today. But it was every single event mentioned in every film, TV show, cartoon, novel, and comic and video game put into chronological order so that there was a history and noting how things didn't line up because they're different universes. I don't know what drug I was taking that week, partly because I don't do drugs, but maybe I should have been. Maybe I would have talked myself out of doing it. But it was so much fun and insanity that I did multiple other books like that.
Yeah.
And each time I said, yeah, I'm never doing this again. This is a ridiculous amount of work. So naturally, this year I had another one because I don't learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, but it's got to be fun. It's that.
It is.
I mean,
fun.
yeah,
it is.
It's a lot
an
of
enormous
work.
amount of fun. For one thing, it is an enormous amount of fun if you want to know everything.
Yeah.
If you're the kind of crazy person who says, "I'm going to write a book about what's the most obscure universe you can come up with," like just something ridiculously obscure nobody would obsess over, right? I don't know. It's so obscure neither of us can think of it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make up one. My Ugly Horse. It's My Pretty Pony's alternate mirror universe. There you go. My Ugly Horse. Your Ugly Horse. That's what it's called. And so now you decide I'm going to immerse myself and learn everything I can about Your Ugly Horse. And you go down that rabbit hole and you discover it's not nearly as small a franchise as you thought it was, because there was a movie that was only released, to a theater of 6 people, and you thought that was it. Oh no, there were 12. So there were 12 television shows, and there were commercials that were done in universe, and there was, stickers that were only given out in I don't know, white bread
some
pack.
magazine or
Right, exactly. And before you know it, you've got the world's largest collection of your ugly horse memorabilia, and maybe 5 people who will ever
I was
read
just
the
gonna
book.
say, and you're the only fan.
You're the only other person buying all the copies, you and your mom, but you are now the world's foremost expert, because in order to write that book, you need to read those white bread stickers 15 times,
You
and
need to know it.
you need to know it. And so in the end, it's a cool experience, because you come out of it going, I now know everything there is to know about this. Next. What will I do next? I need to know everything there is to know about that. And then in moments of lucidity, you go, yeah, but I still pay to ride the bus. Like, what did I accomplish here? Why did I need to know everything there was to know about Swamp Thing? Why did I do that?
I remember that show from the 80s,
Oh,
right?
not yeah. That's
our-
the comics only. Like my most recent book was a Swamp Thing chronology. And
Yep.
it's only I mentioned the show in it as an example of what's not covered, because I've learned over the years that it is okay to have limits.
Yeah. Yeah, and Constantine too,
Yeah.
right? You did some with Constantine. See, I'm
Well,
not.
so, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I'm not. No, this is a fun conversation. I'm not that fluent with that stuff, but like only the film
Gotcha.
Constantine with Keanu Reeves.
So in the comics, during Alan Moore's run of Swamp Thing, John Constantine was a character that spun off of that.
Mhm.
And just so you know, people will correct you if you say Constantine. I know that's how the Keanu Reeves movie and the Matt Ryan character say it. But
Okay.
one of the things that's in the comics where he originated is that he will correct you, and it's wine rhymes with tine, as he would say, which is how Alan Moore envisioned it. Yeah, I find myself saying Constantine too. I know better, and I still do it, and it's because that's how Matt Ryan and Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Well, I just got schooled by you, so that I'll take that.
No. You're not schooled at all, because only people who read the comics would even know.
Wouldn't understand that.
Yeah. But there's close to 1,000 comics covered in this book, and so that's what I mean. In order for me to have done this, I needed to do an absurd amount of research into Swamp Thing and all of its spinoffs, not just John Constantine Hellblazer, but American Freak and a few others that people may not even know about. And every single appearance, either character, because they're intertwined characters. John will jump in and out of Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing sometimes shows up in Hellblazer, because one is a spinoff of the other. They're interconnected. And I ended up putting together this book that can double as a cement brick. It's just enormously heavy. This is the heaviest book I ever wrote. Like, people say it's the longest book, or it's the one I'm most proud of. No, I could say this is the heaviest book. This actually might need to be registered in New York State as a weapon, because you could kill somebody.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, you put a lot of time into that. I mean, that took you years.
20. Oh, you were reading what I wrote then. That's good.
Oh, yeah.
20 years. It started during a period of unemployment. Actually, no, it predated that. But it started with me obsessing, like I did with the figures. And it's because of Joe Bongiorno. Joe actually was a Swamp Thing fan first, and he and I at the time worked together at a like a cubicleville type, like the movie The Office. Like, we worked in environments. I meant to say Office Space, not The Office, like the movie Office Space, I meant to say. And we worked in an environment very much like Office Space. It sucked. And so he would come in, and he would like, you really need to read Swamp Thing. This is going to be a callback to what your comment was earlier, because that was me. I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, I saw the TV show. Like, I don't know that I really need to know more about the goofy guy in a suit. It was fun for what it was, but and he's like, no, trust me. The comics have nothing to do with the TV show. Like, in name only, that TV show is an adaptation. In name only. And I'm like, really? And he's like, oh, it's mythology. It goes back billions of years. I'm like, really? But I'm also very skeptical, because people will say, and I actually even mentioned this in my intro to the book, which is that people will build things into. It's the greatest thing ever.
Oh, yeah.
This is, and they overuse the word epic. This is epic, really, like that cereal I ate yesterday was epic. Really, the cereal had 10,000 people with bayonets shooting each other over a warfield. That's interesting. That's good cereal. So he came in. He's like, you got to read these comics. Like they're the best. Like they're extraordinary. They're mind blowing. They will blow your mind. I'm like, okay, they blew my mind. Like he was not. There was no hyperbole. I was just loved it. And I could bring me more. Voracious appetite here. Bring me more. And then when I was done, I wanted to reread them, but it'd be rude to say, can I start, borrowing all your comics again? So
Well,
then I bought them all.
Yeah. Well, you're an extremist, right? To a degree. And that's not a bad thing, especially when you really get involved and love something. I mean,
right.
I'm the same way.
That's how it is. Yeah. And so I started writing the book then, and that was like 25 years ago. And just, it was enormous amount of work. So I kept putting it aside because then I'd get other writing gigs that people were actually paying me for. Nobody was paying me for this. Right. So I kept putting it aside. This was just the crazy thing Rich does when he's alone.
Well, all the figures are staring at you.
1,000 comics. It was an insane amount of, but like then finally, like last year, I was like, and it's a book. Why am I not getting it published? So I finally started looking for someone to publish it. And the fact that it now sits on my shelves is crazy to me.
That's cool. There you go. It's another achievement. That's awesome. Yeah, he was talking about it a little bit, and then I did some research on it, and it's like, yeah, that's 20 years is a long time to work on a project. But I mean, it
was crazy.
You had a lot of stuff to go through to deal with to get there.
So yeah, I mean, one of the big ones was that so for people, any of your listeners who read DC will understand this one, which is that in 2011, DC rebooted everything with what it was an event called Flashpoint, which is partly what the Flash movie was based on. And then it was followed by the New 52, which was a complete rebooting. And unlike, DC superheroes tend not to age much. I mean, if you read a Batman comic in the 40s and a Batman comic in the 90s, it's not like he's 50 years older. It's like it's like the same thing with Bond. Like every Bond from Sean Connery to Pierce Brosnan are supposed to be the same guy before it was rebooted, which is absurd because the idea that Pierce Brosnan's Bond was a World War II naval commander is hilarious. But with it, so that's kind of how comics work. Is like you pretend time isn't passing. It's Superman is not 102 years old or whatever. Wonder Woman still looks like a 25-year-old person, but in Swamp Thing, it was different. Even though it was the same continuity, Swamp Thing and Hellblazer, they aged in real time. John turned 35. He had a 40th birthday. He turned 50. By the time Hellblazer ended, he was turning 60. Meanwhile, Swamp Thing's baby became an adult. Like time was passing in real time. And it was wild to see this happen. They were growing older. Time was passing. And in real time, and then the New 52 happened and it got rebooted. And to me, that was like a punch to the gut. And but that also ended up becoming the cutoff point. So what my book covered was everything from the very first appearance until the New 52. Because like in the end, they actually gave me a reason to actually finish this book.
It.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So that was the first thing that happened that put thing on hold. Was that I got to the New 52 and said, do I really want to keep working on this? I'm frustrated that all the comics that come out can't be in this now. They don't make sense in this continuity. But then the other thing was that one of my very best friends in the world, also a close friend of Joe's, Paul Giacchetti, passed away in 2017. And at the time that it happened, he and I had an independent book publishing company called Hassline Books. And the very next book was going to be the Swamp Thing one. He had convinced me after much urging and encouraging, he had convinced me to finally finish that book because he wanted to be the one, he wanted to design it. And so we had decided that was going to be the next Hassline title. And I was excited. Paul did some really extraordinary design work on some of the other books we did. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then Paul died. And that was one of the most traumatic things I ever had to go through because it was sudden, it was tragic, and it broke a lot of us. And 6 years later, I don't know that it's still tough. But I just completely stopped. I didn't look at it again for the next 5 years. And then the pandemic happened, and I needed stuff to keep me sane because I was isolated and it was hard. That's why I reread all of 40 years worth of comics. It's with Marvel. I read 38 Dark Shadows novels. I was doing anything that I could to just keep my mind sane.
Keep your mind.
Yeah, and then I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you guys had it rough in New York.
Yeah, we did. It was bad. And so I said, this now I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to both keep my mind occupied, and I'm going to finish what Paul and I never got to finish. And so that's how that book finally got published. So then I had to find a publisher because Hassline is it's dormant. But yeah. So I ended up dedicating the book to Paul because I would have loved to have had him design it. Thankfully, the company that did it, Bear Manor Media, did a really beautiful design, and I was very relieved to see that because I wasn't sure if I'd like. Just you have the bias. I was like, it's not what Paul does, therefore it's going
not gonna.
suck.
Yeah,
but I ended up liking it.
Well, that's good. It turned out. Yeah, it looks sweet. I think it looks good. Yeah, that's a terrible thing. It sounds like you guys all had. There was like a core group of you guys that. It sounds like you got a magic bond going on,
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, over the years I've developed some very close friendships, and Paul was actually in my local group of friends. Paul was the reason we all knew each other. It just seemed like Paul kept pulling different groups of friends together, and he was like the glue. So we all stuck, and then he left, and then now we're still all very close. But it's like it's something we all experienced was losing Paul, and then even people who, because of Hassline, a lot of my writer friends knew Paul.
Yeah,
and they were just caught just as off guard by it as we were. It was a lot of people, and of course Paul's family. That was the worst. So it's tough. I miss him daily, and I wish that he had seen the book finished.
Well, he just might have. Haslin was your company that you started, right?
So it's funny. We didn't intend to do that. That was not something we wanted to do. But Paul and I had worked together years earlier at a magazine so my day job for 25 years was as a magazine editor, and then 5 years of other types of editing. But for 25 years, my day job was doing magazine editing in the public business to business world, tech magazines. And Paul and I had been on a magazine together for 5 years, which is where we'd met. And then we both left that company many years ago, but stayed very close. And over the years, we missed working together. It was fun. He was the art director. I was the managing editor, and we just had giddy fun every month making the magazine. And so my friend Ed Gross had decided he was going to start a publishing imprint, and he wanted the first book. He had seen online that I was kind of a Planet of the Apes enthusiast, which is a very euphemistic way of saying I am obsessive compulsive about Planet of the Apes. And so he said, I'd love to see you have you write a book. I'd love to publish it. And then for various reasons, Ed ended up not being able to launch that company. And then Ed's a very dear friend of mine. That's not in any way trash talking Ed. I totally got why. It just didn't. Things happen in the publishing world. Things happen. Like you have plans and then things go in a different direction, sometimes because you take on other work. There's any number of reasons, but that company never came to exist. And so I was saying to Paul, who Ed was going to hire as the designer, I was like, you and I know how to do this. We've never done books before, but we know how to do this. Let's do this. And then we'll make it like the first book is basically vanity press because it's mine, but maybe we could find other writers and publish their books. Yeah. And we started doing it, and it was slow going because we had a couple dozen different books that were supposed to be coming in, and most of the writers never turned them in. But we did get several done for other writers, and they were quality books, I thought. And we had a whole bunch that were in the works when Paul passed away, including two that I was working on. Paul himself ended up writing two about Red Dwarf, and So part of his legacy is that he is very well known in the Red Dwarf community because he had published these 2 books that are just extraordinary works about about this really, really niche sci-fi fandom that there's not a lot out there about. And so the fans really glommed onto him, and rightfully so. And then not long thereafter, he passed away. And so, like at the annual Red Dwarf conventions now, there's a Paul Giacchetti costume award. Like he became a permanent part of Red Dwarf, which is
cool.
wild, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but this was what Hassel and I was doing. We were kind of making a name for ourselves without needing traditional publishers about geeky things. And so we had writers doing, well, what's your favorite geeky universe? Write about it. And sadly, most of them were never published because I just couldn't bring myself to do it with anyone but Paul. It was something he and I started, and I just couldn't do it. It was too fresh of a wound.
A wound, yeah.
And then time had passed, and I said, please, with my blessing, take these books elsewhere. And most of them did, thankfully. I was glad to see them get published.
That's good.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I totally being put in that kind of predicament and creating something with someone, and then an unfortunate event happens. Yeah, I would just leave it be. But that's good that the his legacy in a sense still lives on through the Red Dwarf community.
Yeah, so we did 8 books at Hassline before that happened. We had like a dozen more that were coming out in various stages of. You say you're writing it, but I've seen nothing to. I'm about to turn in the manuscript.
Yeah.
Like the various stages, there were like a dozen, maybe more than that, maybe like 15 or 16 books, and like I would have loved to see those come out. I do know that a large chunk of them have, and that's good. I'm sorry for those who, the ones who didn't, but I had other books. Like I was going to start focusing a lot of my writing on Hassline because I was like, this is cool. Like they're always going to be beautifully designed. This is great. And we had a couple, because again, never be your own editor. So I had a couple of people who were reading the books for me. So I'm making sure that they weren't, crap. And, but I miss that. I had fun with it. I wish that had continued. The sad thing is, let's be honest, the saddest thing is what happened to Paul. But
yeah.
But from a Hassline perspective, Paul and I had this idea, and it was probably naive, but like it could have happened. We had this idea because at this point, we're going back to 2008, I think, which is when we decided to do it. And the first book came out in 2009. Is that we would continue to work our day jobs, but that eventually Hassline would be our retirement fund. That was how we saw it. That if we just pushed people to write books for us, and we would publish them, and then eventually it'd be enough royalties
where you would
hire.
Yeah,
it didn't happen. But
other endeavors and adventures to partake in.
It's not. I have found other avenues for publishing. I wish Paul were here to see them, but he's not. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you guys.
Thanks.
I know
it sucks. It does, but it's. I also know that like you said, the cool thing is that the Red Dwarf community remembers him. So like that's something that is not every writer gets to make a lasting impact on the franchise that they were a major fan of. And I've been lucky in that I've been able to have an impact, at least a small one, on several. Paul did it on his favorite one, and that's no small thing.
No, that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Right.
And they honored him. That's the thing it was very touching when they told me because the convention's in England. I wish I could have gone, but I just couldn't do it at the time. And they told me that they'd created, because he had gone there in costume, and it was a really cool costume. And so, and then like, during that following year he died. So they created the Paul Giacchetti costume award, which will now be a thing going forward.
Oh yeah.
And so.
Well, you mentioned through time having different opportunities or things come up and you had to put things on hold. Like, how does that process work? Say, like writing for the Star Trek community or a magazine or the Insider back with Star Wars? Like, did they pitch you ideas, or were you pitching them ideas, and you just had these ideas that you wanted to get down? Like, how does that whole, and
I'd
is there
say
deadlines?
it's a different answer for every single publisher and every single franchise. So for some, and also for different periods of my life, like when I was younger, it was all about pitching. I mean, who the heck was I? Like, why would they come to me, right? I was a guy who had written school board articles. So, so at that, in the early days of my career, it was, and by the way, just so we're clear, I'm still kind of a nobody. Like I know that I've done more, but there are writers who have done 1,000 things more than I have, who are far more impactful. I've carved out a weird little geeky niche for myself, and I'm very happy in it. And I'm glad to be there. But it's like I have no illusions of grandeur. Like there are people who have accomplished and will accomplish far more than I ever will, and I'm cool with that. But in the early days of my career, it was largely me going, please, sir, can I have some more? Please do publish.
Some more
Could
cookies?
I pitch some more? And then over time, people were kind to me, is what it comes down to. I had writers and editors who said, good job, and then they would recommend me to somebody, and that is really what ended up helping. So at some point, I don't even remember exactly when it was. And it was very strange when it happened that to have editors come to me. It was kind of surreal to have publishers. Would you be interested in doing this? Because that's kind of what you're shooting for when you start, but you figure it's never going to happen. You figure it's kind of like if you say you want to be an actor, to use my parents' analogy, when I was saying I want to be a writer, you could go in 1,000 auditions and then you still don't manage to buy lunch that day because you didn't get any of them. But the day that studios are coming to you and say, we'd like you to read this script and be in our film, has got to be a weird day.
Yeah.
It's got to be, right? Like, because that's what you were shooting for the whole time.
And it's happening.
And then it's happening where they we want you to come in and read. And you didn't say to them, I would like to come in and audition. That's got to be a weird feeling, cool, but also terrifying. Because if you screw this one up, like you're a failure, right? and I mean, you're not, but I mean, like that's what it feels like in the moment. Like I've been given the shot. I'm a failure in my own eyes if I don't do this. And so when publishers started coming to me, that was surreal. Like it was a great moment, but also scary because now I'm like, now I have to write.
I guess I could see that side of the spectrum too. It's like,
scary thing.
Oh shit! Now I got to do it
because here's it is the golden objective. I feel like I've described too many things as golden. I don't know why, but the golden objective is to be able to live off of what you're doing and enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So you would think that the moment somebody comes to you and says, "Can you write this?" you would go, "One moment, I got this," and you would drop everything and write it, right? But there's something weird and chaotic about the brain that makes you go, "Yeah, that's great, I'll do it."
Wait a minute.
And then you just sit there blinking, and then you go, I have no idea what to do. So you pop a Blu-ray in and watch a movie, and I got to stop watching a movie. This is stupid. I should be writing this. I'm going to go make a sandwich. Maybe that'll help my brain. Boop, 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 boop. Oh my God, what was this, 1970s? But anyway, hey, Joe, you want to get together and do a movie marathon? Like, why am I doing this? I should be writing, but that's how the brain works, right? And so now you had a week. Now you have 6 hours. Maybe I should write this. But that's kind of what it's like, to give you some insight into how stressful it is, because the brain doesn't work on a conveyor belt basis. Like, for some writers it does. Some can say, and I've seen interviews where writers say, I get up at 8 o'clock, by 9, I'm sitting at my desk and I'm done at 5. I wish my brain worked that way. I really do. It would make things so much easier. I would have 1,000 more books than I have.
Yeah. But maybe that's how your creativeness, that's where it comes from. That's how the sporadicness of it, we'll say.
I like me, I accept it, but but it is sometimes like my brain is going in 6 directions at once. And sometimes it's while I'm trying to go to sleep. not when I'm actually sitting in front of the computer. And it would be really nice, gosh, if now my brain decided to produce something like
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
don't sell yourself short. I mean, you said you got a little window or a sliver, but you know what? You're in that window or you're in that little sliver, and you got to play in something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate. Like you said, the ultimate thing is to
That was the
have that.
goal from day one. And as it started happening, it was a strange feeling. Like, I think part of the reason why I play it down, because I've had people say, stop playing it down, because I'm afraid it's going to go away. I think that's part of it. And this will bring us back to like the main focus of what you were asking about when you first approached me for this, which was Star Wars. I've had people ask me, why did you stop writing for the EU? Because I had never written a novel or a full book. It was like the niche stuff behind, it was source articles for role-playing games or magazine articles that were about specific topics or columns on the comics. It was that stuff, and I wasn't writing the bigger stuff. Why did you stop when you were producing so much? Why didn't you go on and write the bigger stuff? And then what the heck happened that you came back 15 years later and worked on the IDW? But what was going on in the middle? And it's an unfortunate story as to why I left the EU, and I don't really know the answer. So there was a point at which, and if people look the dates up and I have this wrong, it's not that I'm lying. It's just I'm old. But I don't remember time. Time has a way of being fuzzy. But I think that around the same time, I was writing for the Tops magazine, the Insider, and the Fact Files. But they may not have overlapped as well as I think they did. There could be some fudge room there. But I was doing these different publications, and I suddenly got a call from my editors at every single magazine telling me that I had been removed from the list of Lucasfilm writers. And by the way, I don't think that I've ever discussed this in an interview. I've told people about it. But I could be wrong, but I don't remember ever discussing this in an interview. I was devastated. I didn't know why this happened. Nobody had ever complained about my work. I turned it in on time, despite the chaos I was describing a moment ago. I never missed deadlines, and so I was floored. Like I was still in the early stages of my career, and I'd worked to get to this point, and then boom, it all went away, all of it, because the majority of my writing at that point was Star Wars, and the only thing I had left was Star Trek Communicator. So I was just starting over again, and so that sucked, and nobody could give me a straight answer. And finally, I found out through the grapevine that it was because I had written an article for Wizard magazine, for one of their, like they did at the time. I don't know if you're just young enough that you don't remember Wizard. Do you remember Wizard?
Is that from Wizard of the Coast? They had like
no different. It was just Wizard. I actually did do stuff for Wizards of the Coast because I did stuff, a couple of things for the role playing game. But Wizard magazine, they did price guides, and they also did.
I know what you're talking about. No,
yeah. And they did like one-off magazines, or like what would largely be like, what's the best thing? Like you get to websites like Screen Rant and stuff, like where it's like kind of amateurish, but it's
miscellaneous stuff, and
exactly. And so like it's fun to read, but you're like not always the most well-written stuff. So Wizard did a lot of magazines that sort, and I was asked to write something, which was, and you may notice that the time matches up with when I kind of stepped away from Star Wars collecting as well. I was asked to write an article about guessing what Attack of the Clones would be about. And I said, well, look, I'm writing for the franchise. I don't know that I should be doing this. This could hurt me. And so I put in a request, and I'm going to leave all names out of this. I put in a request to somebody specifically at Lucasfilm, not the publishers, saying, look, I will, if this will be any problem at all, tell me and I'll say no. This is paying squat, and I'm doing it. If I do it, it'll be as a favor to a friend. I have no marriage to this job. Like it will. I am first and foremost your
employee.
Yeah. So if you want me to not take it, tell me, and I will not. I don't even want the fact that I'm asking to be offensive. I'm relaying a message from a publisher. If this will in any way be a problem, tell me, and I will never write for them. The answer I got was that shouldn't be a problem. You're not actually spoiling anything because you don't know it. LOL. Like you're right. I really don't know anything about Attack of the Clones. So I wrote an article, and I barely even remembered at this point. We were talking, I mean, when the period between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And this article was basically saying, well, given what we know, it was like, that's why I brought up Screen Rant. It's the kind of article that I don't really write now, which is, gosh, maybe it's this, but like, it's a worthless article because I really wasn't.
Yeah, there's no real facts.
Journalism, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote this thing, and it came out, and they paid me, enough money to buy a sandwich, and I kept writing for the other. I got my copies of it, and I was like, I'm in Wizard Magazine, how cool! And I put it aside, never gave it another thought, and I kept writing for the other magazines, and then boom, Banhammer drops, and I find out from my editors they've all been told I'm blacklisted. I no longer write for Lucasfilm, and it was only years later that I found out that somebody at Lucasfilm picked up that magazine and saw it, and the person who greenlighted it denied ever having any knowledge of it, and that person was covering his butt, and therefore I was fired. And it was a sad day. It was a sad year, and I kind of walked away from Star Wars for a long time.
Oh yeah, well. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
All the people involved are not involved in any of the positions at any of the publishers or at Lucasfilm, so nobody will be harmed by my saying it, and there's no names. But enough time has passed that like it's just one of many stories for me. It's not even an issue anymore. And time went on, and I was a little lukewarm to the prequels. I'm not going to lie, because of that.
Yeah.
Time passed, and I started enjoying the prequels more, and because I don't like holding on to anger, and because I found other work, and I was first and foremost a fan before I was a writer, so I wanted to become one again, and I ended up doing work for IDW, reprinting the Star Trek newspaper strips, and my editor Dean Mullaney said to me, because I was helping as in like an assistant editorial capacity, and he said, and I wrote all of the supplemental materials for each of the five Star Trek hardcovers, and he said, so we're going to be doing 3 more books just like these 5 that you and I just did. You wouldn't happen to be a Star Wars fan, are you? And I was like, oh, this is weird, because it's been a decade since the dark times before the Empire, and I'm like, I don't know, but yes, I am. And he said, so we're going to be reprinting the Russ Manning and Archie Goodwin strips, and it's the first time anyone's done it in their entirety, because Dark Horse reprinted them, but they were edited, and we would like you to serve in the same role if you are familiar with these strips. And I'm like, I have them all. I have all of the strips. And Archie Goodwin, for me, is the be-all and end-all of Star Wars licensing. So, yep, I'm going back into the trenches again.
Yeah. Get the coat on.
Yeah.
Put the hat on. I'm going.
And I thought about it. I'm like, and then I had to tell my editor, I'm like, just so you know what happened a decade ago, the moment you put my name in, all hell may break loose. I don't know. I have no idea if they're going to allow this. And nope. I wrote the introductions to the 3 books, and they went over well, and I was like, oh, the dark times have lifted.
I'm back in the game.
I'm no longer persona non grata. But as far as I can remember, I think that's the no, it's not even the last Star Wars. But the other stuff was non-licensed, which was a trilogy of Star Wars books that anthologies I edited for Sequart with Joe Baronato, a good friend of mine, all about the EU and the movies and so forth. And
like a more civilized age.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of them. Yep. You know, each one had a title, which was a line of dialogue from the movie. A long time ago, a more civilized age. And what's the other one? Oh my goodness, this is horrifying. Yeah. Wait a minute. I should know my own children. So let me see.
That's all right. But that's crazy.
Far away. That's yeah.
I was looking at that one today too. I was going to order it because some of them I want to have some of that, because like Mr. Bongiorno just came out with supernatural encounters, which you guys
Mhm.
did the cult encounters, like.
Mhm.
So, but like I feel like I own a piece of a history with that,
Well,
now.
we'll chat about you having copies when we finish this.
Oh, there we go. But yeah, I would like that. Like that stuff is meaningful, and it honestly, you don't know how appreciative I am that you guys like yourself and Mr. Bongiorno and Mr. Bythers, trying not to get emotional, but like you take time to talk to me, because this is just so cool. It's just
No, it's
it
an
blows
honor.
my mind.
It's an honor to hear that. It really is.
Um,
Because I'm not being humble when I say I'm like a really tiny cog in the wheel. So the fact that you actually feel that way is like really, to me,
yeah,
one of the
it's
nicest things anybody could say to a writer who contributed small pieces of a universe is to be told you matter. I thank you.
well,
Yeah.
I have all the respect in the world for you guys, and it's just
Well, I can tell with the
it's so
misters.
cool.
Nobody ever calls me Mr. Handley, and I so or sir, which you said in the email. Like you clearly are a guy with respect. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me. Yeah,
Actually, if you don't mind, I just want to turn things around and ask you a question,
sure.
which is how did you get into the EU? Like, what drew you into it? Because you're old enough that you were around in the EU period, but also young enough that like you were still young when the Disney change happened.
Well, as a kid, I grew up with the films, the original trilogy, and they made me. I loved them. I was just I watched them all the time. I actually had my aunt worked at a video store, and we had like dual VHS players. So like she formatted it, so I had all three on one tape. So I
Mm.
used to fall asleep with it every night. It was kind of like, it made me feel safe. It was a good thing. It was hopeful. It was just Luke Skywalker. It was fun, right?
Right.
And then as I grew older, things changed. You grow in and out of things, different fandoms, chasing girls, that whole line of things happen.
Yeah,
And then,
girls planted Star Wars for me for a while too when I was a kid.
yeah.
Suddenly
So
didn't matter as much. Yeah. I mean, it didn't matter as much. Yeah.
I knew of that there was some books, but I didn't know there was this whole line of things at the time. And then one day I was walking in Walmart and I saw Mall Lockdown. And I'm like, Darth Maul, because the prequel, it's a Phantom Menace, is my favorite of the prequels because I was a perfect demographic at that age when that film came out in '99, and it just blew me away. So then later on, I
You would have
seen,
been 15?
yeah,
15, yeah.
and then Maul Lockdown. I know that came out later, but then Darth Maul, I was a big Darth Maul fan, so I caught that and I read it. But then at that time, I still didn't put anything together. I was just reading a book, right, to me. And then a few years ago, I had a change of health arise, and it brought me back into Star Wars more deeper. Like I needed something to give me some light,
I
and
get
this did it. It did it for me. Like honestly, a lot. And then that's how I went down this rabbit hole. And then I started YouTubing things, and then I met a lot of great people that helped me, give me information, advice. Start here, read this. I'll send you this.
it's got to be overwhelming. Thankfully, people like Joe and Mike actually created timelines, which made it easier. But
And then then they're like,
Nathan Butler as well. Like, there's some really, really good timelines out there. But it's
yes.
still, it's got to be like being told, I think you should go to California. Well, what bus route should I take from New York? No, I'm just saying you should walk to California. Like, it's
Oh,
got to be that
yeah.
insane an undertaking. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was overwhelming. And then honestly, I've had a lot of great opportunities with coming through with collections. Like you said, you
Mhm.
can eBay them, you can see them. My
Mhm.
local town. Actually, I probably got 40 books one day from Goodwill because somebody just dumped their collection there, and they were all in fantastic shape, and I got them for like $1 or $2.
Mm.
So that I got the whole X-wing saga, a lot of the New Jedi Order, the whole
When I got
shebang.
into Planet of the Apes collecting, it was because my wife and I, in the very wee years of our marriage, um, and we got married in '93, so this would have been like the first year of our marriage. Uh, just drove up to Toronto for a week, and I stopped at a comic shop because I had a tendency to go to every comic shop in every town I went back when that in the pre-internet age, and I saw the entire run of Planet of the Apes comics in like a 4 for $1 bin, and I'm like, I've always wanted these. They're usually more than this. I'm buying them. And it's our anniversary week, and I hope my wife doesn't think I'm a schmuck if I sit around reading these later. But yeah, but that's so I know that with that thrill you're talking when like something is going to be expensive to find, but suddenly it's all sitting right there affordably in front of you. It's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it's great, and there's so many kind people in the fandom, and there's a group of guys that are just so knowledgeable, and they're just so helpful, and they're it's been an overwhelming experience. And then it's like, well, I want to start a YouTube channel and talk with people about it, and
How do you deal with how do I put this? Because it's something any of us who work with in something with a fandom have to run into. How do you deal with the toxic end of things? And I don't mean, I'm not in any way asking for for you to take a stance on any particular political side, because that's your right, no matter what it is. I just mean that whatever your political stance is, or your religious stance, or even just your stance of whether or not Darth Maul is a cool character, like whatever it is, there is a toxic side to every fandom. The type that sits around and says your idea is wrong and my idea is right. Gatekeepers. Incels, the type who say, the women aren't really geeks. All of those toxic types of people. When you run into those people who say, I am more of a fan than you are, or my idea is more right, or your interpretation of what Lucas is or the other filmmakers or novelists are saying is inaccurate because mine is the right way. How do you react as somebody with a YouTube channel? Because it's got to be in the I have to imagine that stuff shows up in the comments.
I've actually only had a handful of negativity towards me, in a sense. Not really toward, I don't know, just not really towards
That's
me.
good to hear, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
surprising too, because they're vitriolic sometimes.
Well, I like to just be the middle of I made it known, like I said earlier, I'm a fan of all of it, the expanded universe and the Disney stuff. I've read some of the new Disney material books, but like there's so much, like you said, starting from the beginning, and I'm loving it, and it's been great. But I try to stay middle of the road because I'm just a fan, and
Right.
to try to show kindness and be humble is a great word that you used earlier, to everyone. I'm just trying to stop that diversity, I guess, in a sense, and then try to do it through great conversations like we're having today, and fun ones, and show that it's not, because you said there was a time, and I've heard and done the research of when the Disney bought it, how that affected everyone.
Oh my
And
God, the internet broke. People just very worst aspects of people, of like sane people's personalities.
Yeah,
went out the airlock for a while.
that's what I've heard and
On
read.
both sides. Like it wasn't like it was like there were people like if you accept Disney, you're the worst person ever. If you don't accept Disney, you're the worst person ever. Like, it was like, dudes, it's a story about a princess and a farm boy and Laurel and Hardy made of metal. Why are you taking this so seriously that you're getting angry?
Yeah.
In the world? Yeah, I don't know. And it happens in Star Trek fandom as well.
I can imagine. So I just try to take it, on the chin and respond with kind. Like the world, we need good people in the world. Let's face it. The world's that's a whole other can of worms.
That's a truism. Yeah, absolutely.
We could get into, and there's a lot of darkness, and we need to shine some light. If we just took a time out and threw the caution flag and said, hey, 5 years, everyone just chill. And
right. We need Thanos is what we need.
Yeah, I
need Thanos to snap. The rest of us will be like, okay, we're all in line now. Yeah. but
the world would be a different place.
Yeah. And then when the Avengers unsnap it, everybody they come back. The people who lost everybody are just so happy to have them back. The people who are died are happy to be alive. Everybody's now in a good mood, and we're all one big happy family.
Win-win.
Right. So we need Thanos. That's what we need to do. We need to find Thanos. But I find that's like Star Wars is just it works best when it's fun.
Yeah.
Right. And the fandom works best when the fans realize this.
Agreed.
Because there are parts of Star Wars I do like. There are parts I don't like. I'm as weird as it is, the Jedi are less interesting to me. And that's weird because you'd think that's Star Wars, right? But and I love Clone Wars and I love the Jedi stuff, but for me, I'm all about the clones in Clone Wars, which is funny because Attack of the Clones is my least favorite Star Wars movie, but in every every single time they introduce a new clone, I'm like, this is like the 972nd clone that I've met, and I'm somehow juggling them all in my head based on his inflections and accent.
But it's still
and
cool.
And I'm like, I'm so into this.
Yeah.
I'm caught up into the idea of this, this basically, purposely bred slave class that the Jedi think it's okay to exploit. Like, I'm so caught up in their story, right? And then it's like, the Jedi are kind of dicks.
Yeah.
And and so for me, like, I get caught up in that. But there are other people who would be like, I hate the clones, I hate the clone novels, I love the Jedi. And my response to that is cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
Because that's what you like, and that's what but there are people who will get so angry. What do you mean you don't like the Jedi? You realize the Jedi are not real, right? Like, I didn't say I hate Italians. I said the Jedi storyline is a little boring to me compared to the clones. Like why are you getting so worked up? What the heck, man?
I know. It's crazy. I mean,
it happened with Star Trek with Discovery. When Discovery redesigned the Klingons, you would think with some people that someone had just like come into their house and set fire to all their belongings. Like it was so over the top melodramatic how sometimes fans get.
It's that passion, But
Yeah.
as long as you can, like you said, you don't need to be forceful or rude, or you like what you like. But at the end of the day, it's what we all like it, right? And we like.
And you don't have to like everything,
right?
You don't. I recently did a podcast with my friend Doitano. The podcast is called The Comics Cube. And one of the comments I made on, he was like, oh, yeah, I like that, which was we were discussing what I mentioned earlier, the new 52 cutoff on the Swamp Thing book. And I said, I had when I found that I wasn't enjoying the new 52, I had to do something I normally don't do with fandom, which is to say, I'm done collecting. It's not easy for me to do that. Like, if there's more, I need to keep reading it.
Right.
And I only did it with Star Wars because of what I opened up about a little while ago. But otherwise, like, Swamp Thing is pretty much the only thing I did, and it's only because I love the pre-new 52 stuff. But you will never see me going into a podcast and railing against DC as if they shot my sister or something because the new 52. It's still just comic books. Like, I have that perspective. It's still just comic books. And I was explaining this to Doy, and I said, he goes, it is so refreshing to hear someone say, sometimes it is okay to change your mind and walk away. It is okay not to read everything, because some fans, I think, forget this. They're upset. Well, I refuse to buy Disney. That's okay. That's fine. Don't.
Yeah. What's
there are still a couple thousand titles you could be reading, right?
Yeah.
Like, so find another universe to read.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Perfectly said.
Yeah. Or if you like it, read it.
Do you have?
I have no idea why my voice just went full on Bobby Brady just now. I just I suddenly went into Bobby Brady's.
You jump back. Yeah.
I don't know what just happened. Yeah. Read it.
You still got a little bit of time, sir? I mean, I'm having fun talking. I take a little intermission. I drink a lot of water and stuff, so I gotta.
Oh, go right ahead.
You're okay? You're good I'll be right back.
Yeah, no, go right ahead. That's why I have this cup here.
Be right back.
Mm-hmm. Are you okay? Because you had mentioned that you had a health problem, and then you had to rush off. Are you all right?
Oh yeah. No, I just.
Oh, okay.
I had to drain the main vein.
Oh, that's all it was. Okay. I thought, like, I was thinking water intake, not water.
Oh, no. I drink a lot of water.
I drink a lot of water. I thought you were getting, like, lightheaded and dehydrated or something.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
No, I had a little accident working out, and it affected me now for the rest of my life. So.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it is what it is, but that's another reason why I got back into Star Wars, and like I said, it helped me. And my family and that saved me, basically.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But you've got a healthy attitude about it. It might break some people, and you've. It's like with what I just talked about with me and Paul. Like, you either, when terrible things happen, they either break you or you learn to, you learn to find the new reality, because you never go back to the person you were before the terrible thing happened. It's impossible. But you find a way to become the person who is able to deal with what happened. And that's the new reality. And it sometimes that's the best you can hope for, unfortunately.
Yeah. And honestly, you guys, that's what brought me here to this. So everyone that I've talked to so far has been a part of that healing and trying to find just a different way. Like you said, you take what you can do and do it.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful that everyone takes time out of their life to spend with me.
This sort of thing's always fun.
And it's fun. It's something fun that we all enjoy and talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the negative topic of things. Yeah, so far it's been pretty good to me. Like minus a few things of the people that really get in depth with things. Like one of the comments was my knowledge of the EU is very surface level, which it truly is because I'm
See,
still
that's
learning a lot of
gatekeeping.
it.
Whoever said that, I have a problem with, because that's gatekeeping. I hate that. I hate that's, for me, the most toxic part of fandom. Well, the most toxic part of fandom are the misogynists and the racists. But putting that aside, because that part's obvious. Other than them, the most toxic part of fandom are people who put new fans down, or who say you are less of a fan, or I am more true of a fan. I hate the phrase true fan. It doesn't, there's no such thing as a true fan. If you like something and have spent $25,000 on it, you're a fan. If you saw the movie yesterday and said that was a good film, you're a fan.
Yeah.
And whoever said your knowledge is what did you say, surface
Surface
level, is being a gatekeeper. They're implying they're more of a fan than you, and I say to them,
yeah, that sometimes I want to be that way.
mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie,
Because
but
it's not right. It's not right. Like everybody who gets to the point of like Joe is a super fan. The average person could not write supernatural encounters, and it requires an absurd amount of knowledge and rereading and studying and analyzing. Abel Pena could probably write it. Like, he's one of the few people who could, but there are not, other than Joe and Abel, there are not a lot of people who could do it. And neither one of them has ever, in my presence, ever said that someone else is less important because their knowledge is surface level, or because they're new to it. Right. And because that they take the opposite stance, as do I, which is, hey, welcome. Like that's the only way a franchise continues, is that newer people come in and embrace
each other. Yeah.
Otherwise, it becomes archaic. How many, the very, like, a lot of people talk about Anne Rice or Buffy the Vampire Slayer as being the first reluctant vampire, and neither one of them was. The first reluctant vampire that I'm aware of was Varney the Vampire, which was a Penny Dreadful in the 1800s. And most people don't even remember Varney. Why?
Yeah.
Because it didn't last. One generation was not, I mean, it does still exist, but there's no massive fandom for it. So one generation is not passing it on to the next.
Yeah, the continuation.
Yeah, and so you get to Anne Rice's novels or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and people going, wow, poof, what an idea, a reluctant vampire. Now, both Anne Rice's novels and Buffy the Vampire Slayer are cool, but they're not the first, right? And so that perspective got lost. So the only way for this to continue is for people like you to come in and embrace it. It's a good thing that you are, and anyone who's making you feel lesser because of it, shame on them.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we should all, like I said, most of everyone that I've is taken to me very well, and helped
You
me.
don't need
And
them. If the people are doing that, you don't need them in the comments. Just, you don't need them. You don't need them watching your videos.
Yep.
When I said before that sometimes the arrogant side of me comes out, I get heated with stuff like this. So
No, but that's, you're passionate about it too, and
Mhm.
protective of the fandom, and that's I like that. That's not a negative thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned Planet of the Apes, though.
Mhm.
You love that, and your mom. My dad was originally from California, and he went to some convention. He was telling me a story the other day because I told him, I'm like, I'm excited. I'm going to talk, and said, you watch Planet of the Apes, right? He's like, yeah. I remember a little bit being on the TV, the television series from time to time. But he went to some convention, and there was a lot of different stuff there. The cars from American Graffiti were there, and I believe the costume for Cornelius was there,
Mm,
and Rowdy. Oh, I can't think of his name now.
Roddy McDowell.
Rowdy McDowell. That's it.
Roddy.
Rowdy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roddy. Roddy McDowell played 3 different characters in the Planet of the Apes movies and TV series.
Yeah.
And,
Cornelius was one of them,
Cornelius
right?
was one of them, and then his son Caesar, and then on the TV show he played Galen.
But I believe he was there, or the costume designer.
So if he was there, that was it was years ago, because he's
Yeah, it was.
unfortunately been gone for years. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the early 70s.
Oh no, that makes sense. So that would have been
Yeah.
okay. So that period, if you run this past your dad, he'll remember Ape Mania. There was a period when there was a resurgence in interest. The films were being sent around in theaters like in blocks. You could go see a ton of them at a time.
Yeah.
The TV series was on the air, and it was called Ape Mania. So that's probably the period he's talking about there.
I think he mentioned that too. Now that you said Ape Mania, that's kind of stuck out to me.
It was an unusual period. It was fun. Like the apes were kind of like, at the time, for that one brief portion of a decade, they were Star Trek, MCU, Star Wars. Like they were the bomb. They were
was it.
And there were Planet of the Apes themed rodeos. There were Planet of the Apes themed shopping mall guest appearances. There were like you name it. That was Planet of the Apes themed garbage cans. That was a big one. I still wish I had mine because it got rusted. I looked it up recently on eBay. An exorbitant amount of money for an
No,
I'll never own one. There's no way I'm willing to spend thousands of bucks to throw garbage away. But I wish that I had it. And but during Ape Mania, this was an insane period. And I was a kid. I remember it, but only because I would see ads in the paper for where you could go see all 5 movies, which is an insane amount of time, by the way. You're talking about spending a whole day in a movie theater.
I think he said he saw it in the outdoor. That was a big thing too.
Yeah, drive-ins. It was a big thing with drive-ins, and that was good because you needed to be able to get up and walk. You really can't sit for 14 hours. And I know this because right after the third Lord of the Rings film came out, I decided I was going to, over the course of a weekend, watch all 3 movies, but I was going to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I did all 3 on a Friday. Oh. And the pain that I was in, and these are the extended versions, not the theatrical version. So the pain that I was in when I was done is indescribable. I couldn't move. And I said, that was I knew this was, I know how the body works. I'm not stupid. I know that if you sit for 16 hours straight, you're going to regret it.
Yeah.
So it's good that they did it at drive-ins because people could get up and walk around that way. Yeah.
Oh man, there's nothing like the extended editions of Lord of the Rings, though. Not to jump off subject, but phenomenal.
Well, I mean, every subject seems to be on subject here. So
yeah, well, right, we're geek culture. This is what we love. He went.
Yeah.
He went to that, and he was something about how the costume was made to fit, so he would actually walk like hunched over.
Roddy McDowell came up with the walk that became the definitive ape walk, and so the other actors, just to varying degrees of success, would do it. And he also did this. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm doing.
Yeah, yep.
With the nose,
yeah,
he would like that. That's what it was. And so between the walking and the hunching and doing that, he came off very believable idea of a man in a chimp suit dressing, being a chimp. Obviously the Andy Serkis one looks more like a chimp because it's CGI and motion
now,
and so forth. But for the time, what Roddy McDowell did was extraordinary because kind of like Christopher Reeve made you believe a man could fly, which is wild. Like he's extended on ropes and. No, I believe it. Not only do I believe he could fly, I believe somebody could do this and nobody would recognize him. And there's no other version of Superman that has totally made me believe now I'm a different guy. Right?
Now, yeah.
Right. And Roddy McDowell, despite the fact that he was in a chimp suit and he was a human size, like he was, know, 5'8" or 5'9", and when's the last time you saw a 5'9" chimp?
Yeah, right.
Right, but it didn't matter. Like he successfully got you to get past that line into in terms of suspension of willing disbelief, and the other actors, Kim Hunter and everyone else who played the apes, did it as well, and they modeled it based on what he did.
Yeah, right.
And it was brilliant.
So I want to share that with you since I knew.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. You and I are both apparently the children of first generation Planet of the Apes fans.
Yeah.
So.
And then also you like horror. Were you a fan of the Munsters, the television show, the original?
So it's funny you should say that, because I'm part of and locally I'm a part of a group. There's like 4 or 5 of us, and like we'll like share writing with each other.
Yeah.
And just recently I read an essay I'd written for an essay anthology a few years back, specifically about the fact that I was a monster kid. And so I grew up watching anything that had monsters in it. Munsters was one of them.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't be a 1970s Monsters kid and not watch the Munsters. But so I grew up watching just anything with a monster in it. It to me was great. I was and remain a major fan of the old black and white Godzilla films. The modern day films too, but I really loved the black and white ones. And you know, the early age, you know, and then the whole Showa period of Godzilla, or anything with any Ray Harryhausen. I don't know how familiar you are with his, but you watch old movies and it's like the little stop motion and the models, like, you know, one of the later ones was the original Clash of the Titans, but there's earlier stuff, you know, like you know, the Sinbad movies, and like there's all these like this really cool stuff. Anything from that era with monsters, the Universal Monsters movies, like the old Frankenstein and Dracula, to some extent Hammer, but I was more into the Unimon. And but then when the Munsters and Addams Family came out, well, I mean, actually they predate me, but I was very little when they were. But when I started seeing them in reruns, I was just so into them, because I was like, this is everything I want, but hilarious.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
He lived next door to a stuntman that worked on the Munsters television show. Yeah, his name was Jack Wilson, and he actually did the scene where Herman's holding on to the dragster, and the dragster's taking him around.
That's so wild.
That's the stuntman, and he was actually on roller skates, and there were smoke bombs. My dad was telling me the story.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting, so I wanted to share that with you too.
Did he ever get hurt?
Yeah, actually, he got
guess
punched.
Every stuntman has a hurt story. Yeah.
He actually had a scar on his nose from Clint Eastwood getting punched.
Huh. Yeah. Oh, he didn't check his punch right?
No, yeah, something on the suit caught him when he came around, like a button or something, and it got him in the nose, and it ripped his nose.
Years ago, and I feel so bad that I can't remember his name. You know, like that's like the stuntman's bane, is that nobody knows who they are. Like,
right.
I really wish I could say it. I can't remember what his name is now. That's awful. Of all the people to forget, the guy who gets forgotten. But I was talking to him, and he told me he like lost all 4 of his front teeth because of somebody not checking a punch properly. Just clocked him right in the mouth. And he had spent all this time showing him how to do it, and he didn't do it right.
He
suffered neck injuries and just knocked all 4 of his front teeth out. And he was like, "Are you serious, man? Seriously?"
Yeah, that's crazy.
What's his name? Oh my goodness, it's gonna bug me. I'm gonna remember as soon as this call ends.
Well, I mean, my dad remembered because he used to. He said the guy was cool. He would go over there and he'd weld stuff on his go-kart for my dad. You know, my dad was younger, obviously, so it was just he hung out over there and he would just tell him stories. So it was interesting.
See, but this is why these stories continue. This is why this is like an avenue like this is great, because it allows those stories to continue. That my kids' generation don't appreciate it, and that is I've never sounded more like an old man in my life. You kids today, you got no sense of proportion. Get off my lawn. But it's true. Like, you know, like it's kids who are growing up in an era without practical effects don't realize just how incredible, the job of doing just Herman on the back of the car. Like that was really a guy being dragged on the back of a car.
Yeah.
Or like watching Charlie Chaplin, they don't realize that a house actually fell, right? So it's like they see this, they grow up in an era with digital effects and they can be awed by it, but there's something, and some of it is really impressive, the digital effects, but
Sure.
there's something about practical effects and the danger that somebody might punch you in the face and knock your teeth out, or like there's something wild about that era of filmmaking that is still intriguing, and I wish it was still as awed as it awed me when I was a kid.
I know what you mean. Generations change. Everything's changed.
And
Like
that is a good thing. It is a good thing because
Right.
you also, do things like not the masses don't grow up worrying about getting cholera. So yeah, it's good that things change.
Yep.
But there's also something lost at the same time.
Yep. Things get
Yeah.
forgotten. Even like
Yeah.
old literature. Mr. Bongiorno and I talked about that a little bit.
Well, like I brought up Varney the Vampire.
And you brought, I was just going to say,
90%
Varn
of
never
your
even.
audience is going to go, what, Barney the dinosaur? What did he say? Like,
Yeah, was it
Varney the
purple?
Vampire. What the hell is that? Yeah, so, yeah, right. And
So-
and Varney is such an important part of the vampire history, because it introduced the idea of a vampire who doesn't want to be one, but it got largely forgotten. And in fairness, partly because it's not the greatest book in the world, so that's part of it.
Well-
But it is still important to that tapestry, right? So it's a shame that the stuff that matters sometimes is forgotten.
Yeah. Doesn't carry on.
Yeah.
That's what I've tried to do that with my kids too, but they're just like I mentioned to you earlier about the digital world that we're in now in media. I mean, it's great things. We're getting to do this. I'm getting to meet you and talk to you and share a conversation and create a relationship.
This compared to me having to talk to David Alan Grier while he was sitting in the back of a limousine with a phone somebody handed him for 10 minutes. Like, this is so much easier.
Yeah. Or the
Yeah.
fax one.
Yeah.
That's
Or the
impressive.
fax. Yeah. Although I will always treasure the fact that
Yeah.
Asner, faxed me a joke making fun of my question. I think that's awesome. But
So I've tried to get them into some of the things that I'm into, but they just don't. They're in their own world with their, all the, I don't know, social media stuff. I'm not into all of it. Like I don't do Twitter or whatever it is, or I don't do TikTok or none of that kind of stuff. Like I'm not fluent
you
in
just
any
make
of that.
yourself sound old too.
I
Welcome
do. Yeah.
the kids with their TikToks and
Yeah. So, but when it comes to like reading, like I have to physically hold it. I can't do the buying digital stuff. Like that's not me, yeah, exactly. Well, it's back there. I got books. You can't see them. I got bookshelves all over. Oh my goodness sakes. Oh,
that's just one part of the room.
that's from the floor to the ceiling bookshelf there.
It's custom made too, by the way.
You would have to be. It would have to be. I need one like that.
That's what insanity looks like, folks. Don't do it.
Yeah, but there's history there. That's what it is.
The cool thing is that part of it paid for itself, because it's a lot of it is research. Like if I'm writing about something, I can just pull it back.
I was going to ask you about that. You basically got your own research laboratory.
Yeah.
When it comes to writing a piece, if you're writing for that specific organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps. It helps when you're doing freelance work for a franchise you really love, because basically that your hobby pays for itself, and then you can look your wife in the eye and not have to say, yeah, I just spent $100 on a piece of paper thing,
yeah,
only 22 pages, because by the way, I also just wrote an article about it and they're paying me $100. This is free. Like it helps to be able to
yeah, that's
fact that it pays for itself.
That's the ultimate goal there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in fairness, my wife has never begrudged me any of this. Like she gets all excited when I show her the latest thing with my name in it. So like for her, like she doesn't get this, but she's also like, it's cool what that leads to, you know?
Yeah. So you can't. What are you reading currently? Are you
reading?
What?
Oh,
yeah.
So what I'm reading currently is an omnibus. I would show it to you, except it's upstairs, of DC Comics House of Secrets. And that was for those who don't know, it was it started off as a sci-fi anthology comic, but it eventually was rebooted somewhere in the issue 80s, 84, I forgot what it was, 81, whatever it was. It became a horror anthology. And for anyone who reads DC Comics, if you've read The Sandman and you've met DC's version of Cain and Abel from the Bible, they started off as the horror hosts of a pair of comics called House of Secrets and House of Mysteries, and they were just like the Crypt Keeper or Vampira or other horror hosts. They would introduce a story. Welcome, kids, and have you seen the story of Horace Hofstadter, who killed his wife in a frenzy, like that sort of thing.
Yep.
And but that's kind of how that started, and that led to it's one of the things that led to Neil Gaiman writing The Sandman, which led to The Dreaming. The idea that these horror hosts were part of a mystical world in DC that the other characters never knew about, right? And so that, but whoops, almost knocked over my computer. But predating that were House of Secrets and House of Mystery, and I decided I'm just going to read all of it just because that's how my brain works. So I'm like 110 issues in, and I'm enjoying it. It's not. Sometimes it's literature, sometimes it's schlock. You never know.
Yeah.
It's Forrest Gump. You never know what you're going to get.
Right?
In one issue, like Abel is the host of this one. Kane's the host of House of Mysteries, and I'll do that next. And Abel will introduce the story, and the introduction plays it up like you're about to read something by Alan Moore, and it's the dumbest thing you've ever read. And like that, and there's value for that too. That's why Mystery Science Theater 3000 exists. There's room for stupid.
Yeah. Well, there's room for everything.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
Well, we were talking about vampires and horror stuff. What did you think of Morbius?
Well, I would say most of all, my reaction would be that I didn't see it yet.
Oh.
So here's weird, right? I'm until the Arrowverse and the MCU started, I was never really a superhero fan, which is surprising. A lot of people expect me to be a superhero fan. I've become a great fan of the MCU, and I, for a long time, was a fan of the Arrowverse, but I had to be dragged into it. I could never really. Now, I said before that I was a fan of the Michael Keaton Batman films, and I for some films I was able to just put aside the fact that superheroes weren't my genre, because I love a good story. It doesn't really matter to me. Are we talking A Star Is Born or Ernest Saves Christmas? If it's enjoyable, I'll watch it, right? And so I didn't like go, ew, I wasn't a snob. Don't get those superheroes away. Bah, it wasn't like that. It just wasn't my genre.
Yeah.
And so with the Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies, I haven't seen either of the Venoms. I haven't seen Morbius. Now that Tom Holland, though, now that his Spider-Man has sort of flopped through the multiverse, I'm realizing I kind of need to catch up, because now I know he's going to be interacting with that universe. So I will. I'll watch all three of them. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah. I know. I liked it. Actually, I bought the comic book omnibus for it because I had no idea about it. Honestly, I've never heard of Morbius.
Off my radar. I mean, I'm familiar that it exists. I don't know much about the character.
Yeah.
I thought the trailer looked pretty good, but I heard so many bad things about it that it was never an urgent thing.
Yeah, it wasn't a high priority.
Yeah, but I will, and I will give it fair. I will give it a fair shot. I'm not going to go in going, this will suck. I want to enjoy it. I go into everything that way.
Yeah,
I think too many fans go into things like thrill me, like as if I know you suck, prove me wrong. It should be the other way around. It should be, come on, be good, man, because I want to enjoy this. And then if you're not, you're disappointed, fine. But don't, like, if you go into it going, Disney sucks, Paramount sucks, CBS sucks, this sucks, sucking sucks. If you go into it saying that, then of course it sucks.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
That's the truth.
That's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you get in behind the wheel of a car when you're learning to drive and go, I can't do this, I'm not fit to drive, I'm going to crash, I feel bad for whoever's in the passenger seat, because they're probably going to be in a car accident.
Yeah.
So, you have to. So I don't know. So when I watch it, I'm going to have that same exact attitude, which is, oh, I hope this is good. I hope it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that attitude. I love it, man.
I think it's the only way that makes sense.
Making me laugh so much.
Yeah. Why watch it otherwise, right?
Yeah. No. It's the truth. It's
probably why I'm still watching all of Star Wars and Star Trek and MCU, even when I find them not entirely thrilling, because I'm like, well, the next one might be better.
Yeah. I don't mean to be jumping around from topic to topic, but it's just I'm having fun chatting with you.
Absolutely. I have no agenda here. Whatever, if you ask me about My Little Pony, I know nothing about it. I will find something to say. So I just found 5 minutes of conversation about a movie I've not seen. So
you make it work. You're a good conversationalist.
Thanks. So, let's talk about that.
No, let's talk about that. Let's go on to that subject now. So is there any, I know you can't really give spoilers about certain things you're working on, but is there anything on your end of the table that you're looking forward to in the future process?
Well, let's see. For a while, I was working for Eagle Moss, and Eagle Moss published the Star Trek graphic novel collection. I was the editor of that, and it was a great gig. I enjoyed it a lot. And then Eagle Moss, during the pandemic, had financial problems and went out of business, and that was heartbreaking. Because not just because I wanted to keep doing the graphic novel collection, but because as a companion piece to that, I was writing a weekly column for Eagle Moss's website, Hero Collector, discussing the complete history of Star Trek comics from 1967 to present. And I'd gotten up to like 2018. I had gotten pretty close when they went out of business. And so I let that fester and smolder in the back of my head, sadly, for a while. And right when I sold the Swamp Thing book, I talked to the publisher, Bear Manor, about where that column was eventually going. And what it was going to be a book from Eagle Moss in the end, that while writing the column, I was simultaneously writing a book about the history of Star Trek comics. And so the next book I do from Bear Manor will be that book sometime late next year. So I'm slowly working at that. It's weird to get back into that. My brain is not in that mindset because I've been working on other stuff after Eagle Moss went under, but I'm slowly getting back into that. I'm writing some short stories, but I can't say for who yet.
Yeah, that's fair.
I've been working on a role-playing game, and I can't say for who yet. Sorry, that sounds really, really.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So funny thing about role-playing games, I've never played one in my life. That's always amusing when I have
really.
That is, I've written for 2 iterations of the Star Wars role-playing game, and got my start. My very first published Star Wars was for a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And I a year ago or 2 years ago, I did a short thing for the current Star Trek role-playing game from Modiphius, and I'm doing, like, actually, this is not, like, the stuff I did for Star Trek and Star Wars was minor. It was small. I'm actually doing something like a bigger thing, a much bigger involvement for an upcoming one that's not announced, so I can't say what it is. But I have never played a role-playing game in my life, not once, and it's weird how that happens, right?
Well, yeah, that's a New Year's resolution, because that's just around the corner. You need to play one.
Yeah, I have no aversion to it. I don't have real world friends who play. That's the problem. You can play by yourself.
Yeah.
You enter a dungeon. What do you see? You move 2 steps over. I see a Gorgon. You can't do that by yourself. It doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
So, so in writing it, what I write in for all 3 of these different franchises is source materials, and then someone else at the company has always had to write the stats, because if you don't play, you don't create characters, right? So I'm not skilled in generating the stats. So everything that I did for the Star Wars role playing game was somebody else did the stats. So for like the stories I did with Shar, somebody at West End Games came up with the character stats. And then I did a piece for the Star Wars role playing game for Star Wars Gamer magazine, which was I did a piece about Marvel aliens, and Joe generated the stats for me as a favor because he had played the game, and I said, Joe, I wrote this article on Marvel aliens. I have to include stats. I can't get away with it on this one, and so we shared writing credit on that. And he edited the article for me and wrote the stats, and then. Later on, all the other stuff that I did was collaborations with Able for Polyhedron and for Star Wars Insider and for the official website. And in all of those, Able did the stats because I just can't. I don't know. I don't know how to do it.
You're not the stat guy.
I'm not the stat guy. Yeah, I would say I need stat. And he would come in and do them. So,
well, let me ask you this. Before you said you were working in kind of like the office space environment, I know this was earlier, but who was the staple guy?
So, funny thing that you should ask that. When Office Space came out, I worked there. Okay. I'm not going to say the name of the company. I don't even think they exist, but I just I don't like trash talking. So I will make up their name. They were called ABC. Because I'm very not clever and thinking on my feet. And so, no, the truth is those who work there will know why. There's a reason I called it ABC.
Okay.
Yeah. So those of us working there, like word was spreading, you need to go see this movie. You need to go. It's ABC, the motion picture. Like, so, insert real company title under ABC. We were calling it ABC, the motion picture because and slowly, everyone was watching it going, wow, I both love that movie and I'm horrified because we had a Milton and we had a person who had a case of the Mondays. And it was like, the person who was always fighting with a printer and the manager who'd like, yeah, okay, you're going
to have to come in on
I
Saturday.
got to do this the right way. I'm going to need you to.
There it is.
Go ahead and come in on Saturday. We had all of these different people, and they didn't talk like that.
Right.
The Milton didn't say things like, "Okay, I could burn the whole place down." We didn't actually have him actually say, but there were squirrely people like Milton and people who were perpetually peppy, like the women who say, "You got a bad case of the Mondays." All these people. It was not stereotypes. These people really existed in Cubiclevilles, and it was terrifying to see this movie and just laugh out loud and go, "Yeah, that's Bob, that's Tina, that's John." It was horrifying to say that. Yeah.
Well, it's true. I think that captured it probably pretty perfectly.
You could Mike Judge, right? Was that who wrote that?
Yep.
Yeah. You could tell Mike Judge had worked in a Cubicleville. You could tell because there's no way that he got it that close if he hadn't. It was the damage that kind of an environment does to your soul.
That movie's classic.
Yeah.
And some actors and actresses through time, like there's never going to be. You mentioned Ernest, Jim Varner. There's Robin Williams. There's just certain people that are
John Adams. Who just are really good at creating these comedic characters that nobody else can do, right? Yeah, there's just certain people that stand out. It's funny because Jim Varney kind of made a career out of one guy, and yet, as dumb as the Ernest movies are, and let's not be under any delusions here. They're dumb. They're hilarious.
They're hilarious.
Stupid as hell, like beyond all measure of stupid. But like, there's something really funny about them.
They work.
Yeah.
They work. Ernest Scared Stupid. That'd be a good one to watch this time of year.
There you go. Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen that one.
He was a funny guy. From what I understand, a really good guy. Everybody spoke highly of him.
Yeah. Yeah. Pee Wee Herman too.
Yeah. Yeah. That one hit home because Yeah, because as weird as this is, Paul, my friend Paul I mentioned, looked like Paul Rubens, and they had the same name, and so he had the same body type, he was the same height, and so he had a pitch perfect Pee Wee Herman costume for Halloween one year, and we were all like, "Oh my god! I've never seen a better Pee Wee Herman in my life." So
Really?
that's it's funny you mentioned him, because when Paul Rubens died, we were like, "Oh, man."
I
Yeah.
went as Pee Wee Herman for Halloween when I was in elementary school.
You
I
have
was
the
a
right
huge
body
fan.
type for it too, So
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
I even had the scooter. I had the
Oh,
scooter
yeah,
with the flag.
all right, that's awesome that you did
I'm
that.
not kidding you. Yeah. True story.
Did
I
you
still
go
have
around doing the tequila dance?
no, well, I wasn't old enough. When I got older, I did, but I wasn't dressed as Pee Wee Herman. That's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Man.
this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I really appreciate you taking time out for me today.
No, it's always I always enjoy, like, I'm always when someone invites me to do one of these, it's like the gamut of reactions, and the first is I'm honored. The second is why? Like, why do you want to talk to me? Like, there's always that. My friend Steve and I often talk about it. It's imposter syndrome. Like, you always, like, no matter what you achieve, you feel like I didn't achieve it. It's a weird thing that humans do, right? So then I'm like, oh, that's cool that they asked me. Like, it's always fun. I'm always happy to do this sort of thing.
Yeah. And thanks for getting back to me too. Like I always get worried. Like you said, there's that fear of just being rejected or just
Yeah,
not
even
being
exactly on
answered.
your side of the microphone, imposter syndrome has got to be just as real a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'll be honest, I get nervous every time, no matter who I talk to. I used to I used to spend like hours in the morning because I'm an early guy. I get up early Monday through Sunday all the time, even on the days I don't work. But I used to spend hours like just okay, how am I going to introduce? How am I going to say this? How am I going to say that? Now it's just like my wife is like, honey, just be you. I'm like, okay.
I like you. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I do.
When I first started, the first time that I ever interviewed somebody famous was when I was for the Star Wars Insider and the Star Trek Communicator, because those magazines, it was like I was doing both at the same time. And the first time I had to interview somebody whose work I admired, wow, that was scary. So I get what you're saying. Like, if you are reading someone, and like if you get like a Tim Zahn, or like on your show, it's got to be like, oh, we're not worthy, right? And that's kind of what I felt like interview William Shatner. Like, seriously, okay, I'm nobody. I don't know. You go through
Yeah,
because it's like, who
you
the
do.
hell am I to ask a question like of Ed Asner? Like, it's like, so I understand it. And by the way, that never goes away. I've been a journalist for 30 years, and interviewing somebody at a company about technology, they're not famous at all. It is still scary.
Yeah.
You don't want to look like an ass.
Right. And so she's like, just be you. And so far I've always been me, but I've just taken it to that next level. It's like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Oh my
No, I
gosh.
could tell you're being you. Like, sometimes I'll do interviews with people and they talk like this. I'm like, there's no way that
Yeah.
you get off and the microphone and still sound like like you're hosting America's Got Talent. There's no way, right? Right? Like, you sound like a person. Because every now and then I'll do an interview with somebody and they're like, "So, Rich, tell me what it was like to enter the acting world." And I'm like, "Oh, come on."
That's really good.
Well, thank
That's
you.
really good.
But then I want to respond that way. Well, you see,
Yeah.
it all goes back to 19.
Yeah, just mess with them.
Like, I want to respond that way.
Yeah. Sure. Rich, tell me about Star Trek.
Well, you see.
Yeah.
No, I just broke into Sean Connery there. We called the dog Junior. But
oh my goodness. Yes. This is great. I'm
anytime
having a
you want to
blast.
do this again, let me know.
Yeah.
I never run out of things to talk about. It drives my wife crazy in an endearing way. So anytime you want to do this again, let me know.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. Like I said, this has been an honor.
Say?
I look forward to it. I look forward to the next time, sir.
And keep in touch.
I will. And again, thank you. Thanks for everyone watching. I hope you enjoyed this fun conversation we had with Mr. Handley. And until next time.
Just so everyone knows, it's Rich. Call me Rich.
Mr. Rich.
I will never think of myself as Mr. Handley. Yeah.
Well,
I'm just Rich.
till next time, Rich. See you
Later.
guys soon.